Have you ever paused in a quiet moment and wondered what really happens the instant after our last breath? It's a question we've all pondered, yet few explore deeply. In this captivating video, we'll journey into the ancient wisdom hidden within the mysterious Tibetan Book of the Dead, a powerful guide that monks have quietly used for centuries to navigate the transition after life ends. But here's the twist. This isn't just about dying. It's about truly living, discovering how ancient insights can enrich every day we have on Earth. Curious, stick around until the end, and you might just change your perspective on life's greatest mystery. If you find yourself moved or intrigued by this kind of content, hit the subscribe button to join our growing community of truth seekers. Your support allows us to continue sharing profound scripts that touch the heart and illuminate the soul. Before there were any modern hospitals to hush our final hours or beeping machines to track our fading heartbeats, profound wisdom about life and death was kept on sacred scrolls. In hidden places and high mountain realms, these scrolls guided not those with pulses and busy minds, but rather the consciousness of the newly departed. This tradition is nowhere more evident than in the Tibetan Book of the Dead, properly known as the Bardo Thodol, which translates to liberation through hearing in the intermediate state. Far from being a mere text read for study or doctrine, it is described as a map for travelers who are venturing beyond the limits of physical existence. The ancients believed that once the body's final breath escaped, the soul could still be guided by the echoes of words lovingly spoken by those left behind. In Tibetan culture, the Bardo Thodol is treated not merely as a compendium of rituals, but as a practical voice that penetrates the invisible. It was not intended for theologians or philosophers to mull over in theoretical debates. Instead, it was designed for the soul that floats free of flesh, disoriented by its newly unanchored awareness. Monks would sit by a still form, perhaps a loved one, a fellow monk, or even someone from the local village, and read the text aloud with steady, unwavering compassion. Each line of invocation was a key to help the deceased navigate illusions, attachments, and revelations that come after the heart no longer pumps blood. Rather than cowering in dread, these Tibetan practitioners recognized death as a transition that should be met with clarity rather than darkness. In contrast, many societies elsewhere plan for nearly every milestone in life. Birth celebrations, school graduations, weddings, careers, even retirements. But they often sidestep the reality of death, leaving it shrouded in discomfort or taboo. Tibetans turned this avoidance around by thoroughly mapping the consciousness that stretches beyond the boundaries of a heartbeat. They ensured that the final frontier was charted with as much care as the living world. Their manual cautions that illusions spring forth in the post-death state, illusions so vivid they might resemble heavenly splendors or hellish nightmares. However, the emphasis is consistently on realization rather than condemnation, seeing that these apparitions are mind-made and that the essence of the departed is beyond them. Why craft a book specifically for the dying? According to this ancient tradition, the period right after the last exhale is an intensely potent time. The mind, free of physical constraints, becomes transparent, luminous, and unusually susceptible to fear or liberation. Without a guide, many souls can become stuck, looping in confusion or longing. To avert this fate, the wise among the Tibetans memorized the scrolls, reciting them upon witnessing someone's final breath. They understood that life's culminating journey deserved as much attention as all the other threshold moments we prepare for, like marriage or starting a new job. Yet this text is not only for someone on their deathbed, it is equally described as a mirror for the living. Recognizing that our daily attachments and fears shape how we face death, the Tibetan sages underscore that preparation must start now in life. The illusions that appear in the afterlife mirror our state of mind, our attachments, regrets, and unfulfilled desires. The Bardo Turtle reminds us that we can free ourselves from these illusions here and now, so when that final breath arrives, we can step through the veil calmly and clearly, recognizing the luminous truth of who we are. Central to this teaching is the understanding that the Bardo, the in-between state, is not a place but a condition of consciousness. When the living body becomes lifeless, the illusions of identity, name, role, background, reputation start to peel away like old paint. What remains is pure awareness. Yet in many cultures, there's a tendency to hush any talk about dying, cloaking the entire process in silence or anxiety. In earlier times, death was not always bound in such trepidation. It was considered a meaningful passage from one state of being to another. This shift in perspective is precisely what the Tibetan Book of the Dead addresses, showing that the essence of death is a natural transit. This text portrays life and death as two parts of a larger reality. The same impetus that drives us to plan for success in life should also drive us to plan for the final transition. According to these teachings, the Bardo is structured with certain stages. In the earliest stage, known as the Chekai Bardo, one may experience the dissolution of the body's elements, earth, water, fire, and air, along with loosening attachments to physical form. The wise traditions emphasize that if someone has practiced mindfulness and detachment while living, the training becomes their anchor when illusions threaten to overwhelm them. One reason the Bardo Turtle became so treasured was its repeated assurance that dying is not cause for panic. If we carried deep fear of the unknown, the illusions we encounter would reflect that terror back at us. If, however, we cultivated a sense of calm awareness, the illusions would lose their capacity to ensnare our consciousness. Essentially, the text teaches that one's attitude in life echoes into the afterlife. This continuity is sometimes referred to as karma, though not in the punitive sense many might assume. Instead, karma is portrayed as a form of magnetism where our strongest inner tendencies shape what experiences we attract. In the West, the notion of purgatory, an in-between realm, sometimes vaguely mirrors the concept of the Bardo, but the Tibetan approach differs significantly by offering explicit step-by-step instructions and guided meditations. It directly addresses the dying person's consciousness, reminding them not to attach to frightening or seductive visions. The text notes that everything perceived in the Bardo arises from the mind itself. Whether the illusions appear as radiant deities or menacing demons, they serve as reflections of our mental states, habits, and unintegrated aspects of the psyche. Monks in Tibet and practitioners influenced by this heritage often incorporate daily meditations on impermanence. They might visualize themselves or loved ones crossing the threshold, or reflect upon the ephemeral nature of all phenomena. Trees, mountains, rivers, relationships, worldly achievements. None of these can be grasped forever. By repetitively confronting impermanence in small everyday moments, they build the spiritual skill to maintain composure when the final moment arrives. In effect, this shifts the entire narrative of death away from dread and into an occasion for profound clarity. Thus, the Tibetan Book of the Dead stands as a beacon illuminating a path that is rarely spoken of in mainstream culture. It declares that if we can become mindful of how our thoughts, desires, and fears shape reality while we live, we will more effortlessly navigate the mind-made realms that greet us once the heart ceases to beat. In the end, this focus on death is actually a deep cultivation of life, urging us to recognize the potential for awakening that lies within every breath we take. Throughout these teachings, the idea of letting go resonates again and again. The text asserts that while many people speak about detachment or surrender as if it were a lofty idea, few truly internalize its significance. In modern culture, we accumulate status, personal items, relationships, reputations, and even intangible assets like achievements or personal narratives. Our minds cling to these as though they constitute our very essence. Yet, from the moment we arrive in this world, we begin an inexorable journey toward releasing it all. The Bardo Thodol clarifies that the mind conditioned by habitual grasping persists in clinging even after physical demise. This is why training in meditation is so frequently emphasized in Tibetan Buddhism and related schools. Such training is not an archaic discipline reserved for monks in remote monasteries. It's an exercise in learning to observe thoughts without becoming ensnared by them. When applied at the threshold of death, these mental skills help the departing consciousness remain calm amid swirling visions. Meditation from this perspective acts as a rehearsal for the moment when illusions surge. If you can watch your anger, your desires, and your fears without identifying with them during daily practice, then encountering the illusions of the Bardo will be significantly less overwhelming. When the text talks about confronting wrathful deities, these fierce forms represent aspects of our shadow, the hidden fury, shame, and unresolved trauma we carry. If not recognized as our own inner energies, these apparitions can terrify and bind us to yet another cycle of rebirth or continued suffering. Conversely, peaceful deities are reflections of our compassion, love, and wisdom. They are the luminous parts of ourselves that we may not have fully owned in life. Ironically, even these blissful visions can lead to entrapment if we mistakenly think they exist outside of us and begin to worship them as separate entities. The text cautions that if we place the divine outside of ourselves, we miss the chance to realize our own divine nature. Liberation, in this sense, arrives when we recognize that the source of both peaceful and wrathful forms lies within. What the Tibetan Book of the Dead offers is a shift in understanding that illusions, whether they manifest as angels or demons, are simply reflections of our mind's content. This confrontational and yet liberating perspective leads to the next key concept: awareness. Over and over, the text encourages, do not be afraid. Recognize what you see as a manifestation of mind. That recognition is transformative. It dissolves illusions at their root because it exposes them for what they are: energetic vibrations of thought, emotion, and memory shaped by karma. The repeated theme of letting go also extends to the illusions we cherish about our own identities. For instance, one might cling to a self-image shaped by worldly success, a certain job title, fame, or personal appearance. These, however, dissolve like morning mist under the warmth of the rising sun once physical existence ceases. In the Bardo, that carefully crafted identity becomes weightless, ephemeral. The real question becomes, can we release our attachment to it? If we do, the text suggests we open the door to boundless freedom, what it terms the clear light, the recognition of our own luminous awareness, untainted by form or personality. Thus, letting go is not a passive or nihilistic gesture. It is an active, courageous one. It means willingly unburdening ourselves of illusions, so that when we stand at the threshold of death, we can see the truth of our being, a truth that the text insists is far grander and more compassionate than our everyday masks. The importance of presence emerges as another vital thread woven through the Bardo Thurdol. In life, we often distract ourselves with tasks, entertainment, social roles, or fleeting ambitions. We might say we're preparing for the future, yet ironically, we seldom prepare for that single inevitable event that every being must eventually face. The text underlines how our day-to-day modes of attention will become the default setting of our consciousness once we cross over. If we're constantly distracted in life, it's likely we'll find ourselves disoriented when illusions envelop us in the afterlife. Monks who meditate in cemeteries or near human remains are attempting to cultivate a form of death awareness by focusing not on morbidity, but clarity. They seek intimacy with the reality of impermanence. Feeling a skeleton under their fingertips or reflecting on the ephemeral nature of flesh reminds them that form inevitably dissolves. In that reflective moment, one recognizes that each breath is borrowed. With that knowledge comes a newfound reverence for the unfolding present. This daily confrontation with mortality generates a sort of inner readiness, an unshakable presence that no illusory demon or god form can break. Yet it would be a mistake to assume that these practices are solely about the final moment. The text's wisdom has direct bearing on how we experience life. When you learn to remain mindful during adversity, or to keep your heart open even when confronted by emotional storms, you're in effect rehearsing for that ultimate test. The little deaths we face in life, losing a job, a relationship ending, or letting go of an old identity, are not just random hardships. In the lens of the Bardo Thurdol, they are preparatory moments, opportunities to refine our capacity to be present and let go gracefully. In these times, presence means observing the swirl of pain or confusion without being consumed. It means not collapsing into the drama, but instead peering into it to see its nature, much like the illusions in the Bardo. By meeting these small endings and transitions with composure, we cultivate the capacity to meet the final ending with the same poise. One might argue that the text's true magic is in bringing heightened awareness to how we live, thereby transforming how we die. Crucially, the Bardo Thurdol explains that the so-called fear of death often disguises a deeper fear, the fear of losing what we have identified as ourselves. By shifting our perspective to see ourselves as more than the body, more than our intellect, more than our roles, we reduce this fear. The text repeatedly states that presence or awareness transcends physical demise. This awareness is the ultimate observer, the part of us that notices thoughts, feelings, and bodily sensations, yet remains distinct from them. In this teaching, the moment the body falls away is not automatically peaceful if the mind has never learned how to rest in awareness. On the other hand, a mind trained in presence can greet the illusions, greet the light, greet everything that arises in that in-between state without freezing or fleeing. Hence, presence is both the anchor and the key and anchor that keeps us grounded amid illusions, and a key that unlocks deeper realizations of what we truly are. By weaving presence, letting go, and awareness into the tapestry of daily life, the teachings not only soothe our anxieties about the afterlife, but also enrich our immediate existence. No matter one's religious background, these principles resonate as a call to live more fully, to be more awake to each breath, and to be prepared for the greatest unknown with a mind that is poised rather than panicked. The concept of karma takes on a renewed dimension in the Tibetan Book of the Dead, countering the simplistic idea of a cosmic ledger that doles out punishment or reward. Karma is explained as a kind of spiritual magnetism, reflecting the patterns and energies we set into motion while alive. A person steeped in resentment, for instance, vibrates on a level that naturally attracts situations or states in the bardo, aligning with anger or unresolved bitterness. Conversely, someone who has cultivated compassion and self-awareness is likely to experience a gentler, more luminous passage. This perspective disrupts the notion that afterlife experiences are doled out by some external judge or deity. Instead, they are cast as an extension of one's internal world, a mirror revealing what the soul still carries. Upon death, consciousness expands beyond the constraints of material form, but it still resonates with whatever mental patterns, unhealed wounds, or unresolved desires one held in life. This is why daily spiritual practice, introspection, and moral reflection become so significant. They're not tasks to appease a god. They are part of aligning one's energy with higher states of being, so that in the bardo, those higher states become the natural environment. Even so, the Bardo Third is unequivocal that this is not about condemnation. It is about continuity. Just as a seed planted in fertile soil will sprout accordingly, our mental seeds, fear, love, anger, kindness, bear fruit in both life and the afterlife. The instructions read aloud to the recently departed soul remind it that any apparitions of torment or bliss are reflections of its own mind. By not recognizing this, the soul can become ensnared in terrifying illusions or even in illusions of grandeur, thereby postponing the ultimate realization of oneness with the clear light. Moreover, the text highlights that the illusions one encounters in the bardo can lead the soul toward the next incarnation. If fear is predominant, the soul may gravitate toward scenarios that promise escape from that fear, manifesting as certain wounds or life circumstances. If desire is intense, be it for pleasure, for power, or for any unfulfilled craving, this magnetism can pull the soul back into the cycle of rebirth to chase those unfulfilled desires. The Tibetan approach sees rebirth not as a random cosmic lottery, but rather a process deeply tied to the energetic imprint each being carries. In modern parlance, one might say, we vibrate into a new existence, shaped by what remains unresolved. Thus, the bardo is not just about facing illusions. It's about discovering how those illusions reflect the soul's readiness or lack thereof to either dissolve into liberation or continue the dance of form. For many, compassion becomes a gentler motive that leads to an intentional return. Some souls, out of love for all beings, vow to come back to help. In that sense, returning to physical form out of compassionate intent is seen not as entrapment, but as a purposeful choice. All of these intricacies highlight the Tibetan Book of the Dead as something of a spiritual roadmap detailing how energy, habit, and intention flow from one realm of experience to another. Karma, in its essence here, becomes the mechanism of continuity rather than a moral scoreboard. Through awareness and preparation, an individual has a chance to transform their karmic footprint, thereby altering the quality of the journey that unfolds after death. Rituals and guided chants play a monumental role in supporting the soul during its transitional journey, and they are detailed extensively in the Tibetan Book of the Dead. Imagine a scenario in a remote Himalayan village. A devoted practitioner who has studied these sacred texts sits beside a deceased relative. Instead of mourning in silence or merely weeping inconsolably, this practitioner begins reading or chanting specific passages intended to inform and comfort the newly released consciousness. In these lines, one finds instructions such as "do not fear the wrathful deities" or "recognize the peaceful forms as aspects of your own mind." Every syllable of these liturgical readings is imbued with purpose. A single incorrect tone or rushed phrase might reduce the effectiveness of the transmission. Tibetan masters dedicate years to honing their vocal precision and energetic alignment, believing that the subtle vibrations of sound have the power to pierce through confusion on a plane where physical communication no longer applies. In many ways, the recitation serves as a spiritual lifeline, connecting the parted soul to an anchor of calm, compassionate clarity. Another crucial aspect is the presence of mantras believed to hold frequencies that can stabilize or elevate consciousness. Om Mani Padme Hum, one of the most famous Tibetan Buddhist mantras, is more than just words. It is a vibrational formula that resonates with the essence of compassion. Chanting it near the deceased is akin to bathing their disoriented awareness in an ocean of loving kindness. This approach reflects an understanding of sound and vibration as fundamental threads weaving through reality. It's essential to note that these practices are not about pleading with an external deity to pardon the deceased or to grant them a place in paradise. Instead, they serve as reminders that the departed consciousness retains a capacity for recognition, for letting go of fear, and for merging with deeper truths. At the same time, the living who participate in these rituals are also transformed. By stepping into this sacred role, they confront mortality head-on, acknowledging that each of us will one day require a guide through the swirling illusions. Interestingly, cultures outside of Tibet have parallel traditions. Ancient Egyptians placed the Book of the Dead in tombs to guide the soul in the afterlife. Mayan cultures used symbolic codices. Sufi mystics whispered divine names at the final breath. Despite varying in outward form, these rituals share an underlying premise that the boundary between life and death is permeable, and that spiritual technology, be it chanting, incantations, or symbolic inscriptions, can shepherd the soul through a challenging transition. Such practices underscore a broader philosophy. Death is not the abrupt annihilation we often fear, nor is it a random leap into the unknown. It's an ongoing journey that can be illuminated with knowledge, compassion, and awareness. By understanding the significance of each stage, peaceful and wrathful visions, the choice of merging with the clear light or following karmic impulses, we realize that death can be navigated with grace. This is the crux of the Bardo Thurdol's message. Spiritual readiness and loving guidance have the power to convert what might otherwise be chaotic or terrifying into a conscious passage brimming with the possibility of liberation. One of the profound lessons woven through these chapters is that death, far from being a mere cessation, is a mirror that reflects how we have lived. The illusions that loom in the Bardo are not random nightmares or fantasies dished out by external forces. Rather, they manifest from the reservoir of our unresolved emotions, beliefs, and attachments. If in life we suppress our anger, cling to grudges, or harbor regrets, these energies remain within us, latent and potent. Once unmoored from the body, these energies can project themselves as wrathful deities or tumultuous visions that cause the soul to recoil in fear. Similarly, if we nurture compassion, love, and selflessness, those qualities appear as radiant beings or peaceful environments that gently beckon us. The text emphasizes, however, that even these serene visions can become shackles if we fail to recognize them as facets of our own consciousness. This distinction is crucial, seeing the illusions as separate from ourselves leads to either fear or worship, both of which encourage the soul to cling to something outside its own essence. The ultimate liberation, described in the Bardo Thodol, occurs when we realize that all appearances, light or dark, stem from the mind's creative power. This teaching resonates with insights from modern psychology. Carl Jung, for example, pointed out that unacknowledged aspects of the psyche, the shadow, can erupt into our awareness in the form of dreams or projections. In the Bardo, this phenomenon is magnified exponentially. With the body gone, the mind's capacity to create realities moves unfiltered painting, entire landscapes from the palette of our unconscious. Without prior training or guidance, these landscapes can be overwhelming or bewildering. However, with the awareness that this is me, this is my own mind, we can navigate these visions with less fear. Hence, the crux of the Tibetan Book of the Dead's guidance is rooted in the transformative power of recognition. It isn't a matter of passively enduring bizarre encounters in the afterlife, but actively knowing their source. This recognition dissolves illusions in the same way shining a light in a dark corner reveals there was never a monster lurking, only the shape of our own imaginings. The moment of recognition spares the soul from panic or the reflex to run back into another life, thereby perpetuating its karmic entanglements. Of course, such recognition doesn't appear magically in the heat of the moment if one has never cultivated it beforehand. This underscores why Tibetan masters urge daily meditative practice and a vigilant awareness of one's thoughts and emotions. It isn't enough to know the text intellectually. One must internalize it so deeply that upon encountering illusions, a deeper wisdom instinctively arises. This is the practical side of spirituality in Tibet, knowledge put to the test in the crucible of actual inner experience. In this way, the message is universal. Even if one has never heard of Tibetan teachings, the principle that our inner world shapes our perceptions, that acknowledgement of our unintegrated aspects leads to liberation, and that presence is paramount, can enrich any spiritual or philosophical path. By pondering these concepts while alive, particularly, the concept that how we live is how we die, we prepare not just for a graceful exit, but also for a more intentional, awakened life in every passing moment. Stillness and silence, often overlooked in modern life, emerge as integral tools for navigating the Bardo realms. We live in a world buzzing with constant stimuli. Emails, social media feeds the hum of traffic, electronic notifications vying for our attention every minute. In such an environment, the idea of stillness can seem foreign or even uncomfortable. Yet the ancient masters recognized that true silence is far from empty. Instead, it's a vessel for profound awareness, a space where we can detect subtler frequencies of experience. The Bardo Thodol repeatedly advises the soul not to grasp at the swirling visions, but to remain still, to merely observe without engaging or recoiling. This counsel directly parallels mindfulness meditation practices, where one learns to watch thoughts and emotions rise and fall like waves in an ocean. If we train ourselves to do this while alive, learning to let sensations pass, witnessing them as phenomena rather than absolute truths, we become adept at doing the same in the Bardo. Silence also serves as a boundary or shield. When illusions become clamorous, wrathful forms shrieking, or even enticing illusions beckoning, the quiet mind can maintain an unbroken calm, discerning what is real and what is not. If we consider many spiritual traditions, from Christian mysticism to Sufism to Zen, Buddhism, the highest revelations often come in silence, not in fanfare. This underscores that silence is neither apathy nor detachment from life. It is an active listening to what lies beyond the surface. In the after-death realms, the ability to sustain inner silence can be the difference between fleeing from illusions and recognizing them as mind projections. The text suggests that if we cannot bear silence in life, if our identity is too tangled in busyness and external validation, the abrupt stillness of the bardo might be disorienting, even terrifying. Conversely, for someone accustomed to finding refuge in silent awareness, the illusions of the bardo can be met with curiosity rather than alarm. Moreover, the power of silence is not just for the dying or the dead. It's equally transformative for the living. In moments of anger or despair, embracing a pause before reacting can transmute an entire situation. By extending that discipline of silence into the deeper layers of consciousness, we effectively train ourselves for any storm, inner or outer, that arises. The result is not numbness, but an enriched depth of perception, allowing us to see the dynamic dance of life with greater clarity and compassion. This approach also has direct implications for how we relate to others. When the text suggests silence and stillness, it doesn't mean we never speak. Rather, it means we engage from a place of mindful presence rather than reactivity. The soul on the threshold of the bardo doesn't need frantic wailing or confusion from those around it. It needs calm guidance, and we in our day-to-day existence can offer calm guidance to each other by cultivating that same stillness. Hence, the practice of silence is an essential thread woven throughout the tapestry of the Bardo Turtle's teachings. It serves as a guardian, preventing us from being carried away by illusions, and a guide gently pointing us to the deeper layers of awareness where fear subsides and unity with a clear light is possible. In a culture inundated with noise, rediscovering silence is a radical act of spiritual empowerment that resonates far beyond our final breath. Ritual and ceremony in Tibetan and many other ancient traditions offer a structured means of weaving together the teachings about death and the afterlife. These practices are often performed with a deep sense of reverence and intention, whether it's lighting butter lamps in a monastery or chanting specific prayers at designated hours after a person's passing. In the context of the Bardo Turtle rituals, don't exist to appease wrathful gods. Rather, they function as intricate mirrors to remind both the living and the recently departed of the ultimate truth that can so easily be forgotten amid the turbulence of strong emotions. Tibetan death rituals are designed to maintain a seamless connection between life and death. The moment a person dies, the community's attention turns to chanting purification and readiness to guide the departing soul. Instead of isolating the body in a sterile morgue, these rituals keep the environment imbued with the symbolic language of liberation, incense that symbolizes purity, the lighting of lamps that symbolize the dispelling of ignorance, and chanting that serves to focus scattered minds on the reality of impermanence. From an outside perspective, it might seem elaborate or steeped in superstition, but those within the tradition understand these gestures as a form of spiritual technology. Just as modern technology aims to connect us over physical distances, these rituals aim to bridge consciousness across the apparent divide between life and death. Their success is measured not by any tangible transaction, but by the quality of awareness they invoke. At the same time, these ceremonies have profound impact on the living. Those left behind find solace in the structured approach. There's a comfort in knowing that as a loved one transitions, their spiritual path is not left to chance. Ritual participation also reminds each mourner of their own mortality. The readings, chants, and prayers become an invitation, Contemplate your own existence. See how fleeting it is and prepare accordingly. Egypt's Book of the Dead, the Mayan funeral ceremonies, and the Sufi practices of chanting God's names to the dying are all parallel examples of humanity's timeless quest to honor the threshold. Each tradition recognizes that this moment of transition, if entered unconsciously, can be bewildering. Conversely, if approached consciously, it opens the door to insight that transcends normal human understanding. These rituals, whether they include chanting incense or sacred scripts, are all ways of saying you're not simply this body. You're a traveler crossing a bridge. In a modern setting, even if one doesn't adhere to Tibetan Buddhism, adopting elements of mindful ritual around dying can transform the experience for all involved. Sitting vigil with a loved one, playing gentle sacred music, or uttering reassuring heart-centered phrases can ease the soul's transition. Such practices do not have to be tied to a particular faith. They speak to a universal need for guidance and calm in the face of the unknown. Hence, ritual emerges as more than just a cultural artifact. It is a profound communal embrace that holds the soul as it floats away from physical form. The Bardo Theodul's instructions point to how such ceremonies done with sincerity and understanding can echo across dimensions, offering navigational cues when ordinary senses cease to function. In essence, ritual is an external expression of an internal truth that death is a journey for which we can and perhaps must prepare, not in fear, but with clarity, respect, and loving intention. One of the text's most central warnings is that when the final moment arrives, we do not magically gain new capacities. Instead, we default to what we have practiced all our lives. If our habit was to react with impatience, that impatience might flare up in the bardo when we encounter frightening illusions. If we constantly nurtured greed, we might find ourselves drawn to illusions that promise fulfillment of our unending wants. Thus, the mind's training in presence, compassion, and non-attachment while alive is the single most significant factor in how gracefully we face the afterlife. This principle is highlighted in the everyday discipline of Tibetan monks who train for death as rigorously as they train for life. Through prolonged meditative sessions, they rehearse noticing thoughts as ephemeral, cultivating loving kindness toward themselves and others, and dissolving their sense of a separate ego. In practicing mini-deaths daily, they become acquainted with the letting go process, so that when the real death arrives, it's not foreign, but intimately familiar. These glimpses of ego death in meditation are akin to dress rehearsals that remove the terror of stepping onto the stage of the unknown. Yet the Bardo Theodul was never meant exclusively for monastic circles. It was widely shared in Tibetan society, and its teachings were often explained in accessible terms so that lay people too could benefit. The essence is that everyone can prepare no matter their social standing or daily responsibilities. Whether a farmer, a merchant, or an aristocrat, the final moment meets all equally. And in that moment, the illusions each person faces will be shaped by the content of their mind and heart. So how does one begin this preparation if one is not immersed in a Himalayan monastic life? The text itself suggests a variety of contemplative practices reflecting on impermanence. Examining one's attachments consciously, practicing compassion each day. Even simple mindfulness, being present while washing dishes or walking, can cultivate the habit of returning to awareness instead of getting lost in endless mental chatter. Over time, these small daily practices accumulate into a robust spiritual readiness. Moreover, the text does not demand we become austere or emotionless. It recognizes that human life includes joy, relationships, creativity, and other forms of engagement. The key is not to cling. We can experience beauty without grasping feel love, without possessing savor, success without binding our identity to it. This approach is sometimes summarized by the phrase in the world, but not of it. If we can live that balance, the illusions we meet after death have less power to ensnare us. When the Bardo Thurdol references the clear light, it speaks of the radiant essence of mind that shines beyond any fleeting appearance. Dying souls may see a burst of illumination that can be either embraced as their true nature or feared as a force that obliterates personal identity. The teachings caution that clinging to form or memories at that juncture will cause the light to fade, compelling the soul to revolve back into cyclical existences. Only those who recognize the light as their own core can merge with it, fully attaining a liberation beyond all illusions, beyond even the peaceful or wrathful form. In practical terms, this suggests that our daily quest is to recognize the light within ourselves, now not waiting until the last breath. By recognizing that everything we see in the world also emerges from consciousness, we begin to align with the luminous aspect of our being. And this alignment is precisely what the Tibetan Book of the Dead teaches us to carry into the Bardo, ensuring that our greatest teacher, death, becomes a passage to truth rather than a plunge into fear. The narration of the Bardo states that soon after the soul leaves the body, it experiences a delicate and silent moment, a transitional space often described as the hush between life and what lies next. In some traditions, this is equated with the fleeting sensation of weightlessness or calm reported by near-death experiencers. The Bardo Thurdol emphasizes that this short window can be potent, allowing for a near-instant recognition of our true nature if we are sufficiently prepared. The soul may sense itself outside its former body, watching from a corner of the room or floating in a luminous expanse. In that initial stage known as the Chikai Bardo, the illusions of a solid, flesh-bound identity can momentarily drop. If we have meditated on the nature of consciousness, we might realize I'm not this body. I'm the awareness that once animated it. This realization can be gentle, but it can also be jarring if one has never considered life beyond the physical senses. This is why the text insists on the importance of spiritual rehearsal. If we have only known ourselves as a body, discovering otherwise under such dramatic circumstances might trigger confusion or dread. Another part of the Tibetan Book of the Dead's instructions for this stage deals with how to maintain equilibrium when the sense of the body dissolves. Some souls, upon seeing their body lifeless, may try to re-enter it, leading to a painful sense of being locked out. Others might become distressed by the sorrow of loved ones left behind, unable to console or communicate with them. The text advises the departing consciousness to resist these attachments that can quite literally tether a soul to the earth realm. Following the Chikai Bardo, the text moves into describing the Chonyid Bardo, where peaceful and wrathful deities appear. This is the phase most popularly associated with hallucinatory visions or cosmic illusions. In this realm, everything unresolved surfaces, magnified to a cosmic scale. If a person harbored violence in their heart, the illusions might take the form of terrifying beasts. If they nurtured compassion, they might be met with resplendent, benevolent beings. Both sets of apparitions, however, are mirror images of the departed's own psyche. The Book of the Dead continually reminds us not to be seduced by the peaceful deities nor horrified by the wrathful ones. Both extremes can cause us to lose our sense of balance. The core instruction is recognize them as part of your own consciousness. That single thread of wisdom recognition acts like a sword slicing through the illusions. Without recognition, the illusions become either oppressive or enchanting. With recognition, they collapse, revealing the luminous emptiness or pure potential from which they arise. This sophisticated view of illusions is why some scholars consider the Tibetan Book of the Dead a profound psychological treatise centuries ahead of its time. It acknowledges that the lines between mental projection and objective reality blur once freed from bodily senses. And while the text speaks in symbolic language of deities and hidden realms, the underlying message can resonate with anyone who has explored the idea that our thoughts shape our perceptions both in everyday life and beyond. Yet the text is more than an intellectual or philosophical guide. It is meant to be lived and practiced. By internalizing the instructions both for the immediate after-death state and for everyday mindfulness, we embed in ourselves a wisdom that blossoms precisely when illusions are at their strongest. As we let these teachings settle, we start to see how each breath in life can be a chance to step beyond illusions, preparing us for that final threshold where everything ephemeral dissolves and only the essence of our awareness remains. One of the most radical statements in these teachings is that death can become a moment of liberation if we align our consciousness properly. This contrasts with the Western notion of death as a final enemy or an ultimate tragedy that leaves nothing but memories behind. In the Tibetan view, it's in that fragile instant when the final exhale empties from the lungs that the highest spiritual realization can ignite like lightning. But such ignition does not happen through luck or divine favoritism. It happens through cultivated readiness. The narrative repeatedly describes the clear light, a radiant awareness that dawns upon the consciousness once the worldly veil drops away. While the text acknowledges that most souls shy away from this light due to unpreparedness, it also emphasizes that embracing it leads directly to freedom from the cyclical nature of suffering. In essence, if we have become comfortable with letting go, comfortable with surrendering our identities, then the brilliance of the clear light will feel like a homecoming. Otherwise, it will seem terrifying, an annihilation of everything we believed ourselves to be. Many practitioners take this theme to heart, engaging in what could be called clear light meditations. In these meditations, they try to glimpse even a fraction of that luminous awareness while still alive. By doing so, they transform the entire concept of death from a monstrous cessation into a doorway they're practicing to step through. This is an advanced meditative path, yet the principle behind it applies universally if we can practice greeting the unknown with openness and love in small ways during life, then greeting the ultimate unknown may become less daunting. When the Bardo Thodol refers to the soul turning away from the light, it touches upon the concept of ignorance, not in the sense of lack of knowledge, but lack of clarity about who and what we are. The illusions that arise do so because the soul still clings to certain desires, memories, or regrets, effectively dimming the luminous truth. The text is compassionate, never blaming the soul for this reflex. It simply observes that turning away is a choice influenced by the soul's own readiness. This suggests that spiritual evolution continues beyond the boundary of physical life, that each new journey, each rebirth is an opportunity to integrate lessons we might have missed. At the same time, the text offers hope in the midst of what might otherwise be overwhelming experiences. Even if we turn away from the clear light initially, the illusions themselves can teach us, mirroring our inner landscape back to us. The wrathful deities, for instance, might show us the intensity of our hidden rage or self-judgment. If at any point we recognize these illusions for what they are. Mental fabrications, the illusions dissolve, presenting another chance to embrace the clarity we initially avoided. Thus, while the Bardo Thodol is known for its vivid descriptions of afterlife realms, its real gift is a blueprint for fearless living. By normalizing the possibility that death can be approached with composure and even transcendence, the text counters modern anxieties that paint death solely in grim, hopeless colors. It invites us to see death not as a final curtain, but as an intimately personal threshold that each of us can prepare for, where liberation is not only possible, but actively offered by the very nature of consciousness itself. Meditation, as often reiterated, stands at the heart of this entire philosophy. Yet it is crucial to emphasize that the Tibetan approach to meditation is not about escaping reality or ignoring daily responsibilities. Rather, it is about cultivating a stable base of awareness that remains unshaken by transient phenomena. When emotional storms arise, whether in life or in the Bardo, this cultivated awareness remains a silent, watchful presence, preventing us from being swept off by the torrent. In practical terms, a typical Tibetan meditation session might begin with a posture that allows the spine to be upright and the body relaxed. Attention then focuses on the breath, gently releasing each exhale as if offering it to the vastness. Over time, practitioners learn to observe thoughts as they emerge, refraining from either chasing them or suppressing them. This practice directly mirrors the instructions given in the after-death realms. Observe, do not latch on, do not flee. If a terrifying or alluring vision arises, let it come and let it go. Another layer of meditation taught in these lineages is the Tonglen practice, giving and receiving. Practitioners imagine breathing in the sufferings of others and breathing out relief or compassion. This fosters an expansive sense of empathy that can counteract self-centered fear. Even in the Bardo, if one has developed a deep reservoir of compassion, the illusions of wrath or terror may transform into opportunities to radiate love instead of panic. In that sense, compassion itself becomes a protective force, a luminous bubble through which illusions cannot penetrate. Moreover, because the mind has been trained to dwell in the present moment, the soul in the Bardo stands a better chance of remembering the teachings of recalling. These illusions are not external. They're me, and I can let them go. This recollection is key, as the text notes that many souls simply forget everything they learned in life when the intensity of the Bardo hits. Their sense of self either merges with illusions, or they cling to familiarity, leading them back into rebirth. But if the memory of meditative stability is strong, it can break through the confusion like a clear bell tone in a fog. One might ask how all this translates into modern living, where long hours of seated meditation can be difficult to sustain. The answer lies in the principle rather than the form. Mindfulness can be woven into daily routines, eating, working, talking, exercising by continually returning attention to the present, noticing emotional triggers, and cultivating an inner observer. Even short sessions of stillness repeated consistently can yield significant resilience. In essence, meditation in this framework is a rehearsal for the ultimate letting go. It teaches us to let go of thoughts in each breath so that when the final breath comes, the muscles of relinquishment is already strong. The illusions of the Bardo mirror the illusions we face in daily life: fear, envy, anger, craving. By dealing with them in microcosmic practice sessions, we set ourselves up for a more graceful performance in that culminating act, where the stakes are higher, but the principle remains the same. Illusions arise, illusions subside, and awareness remains. Through this lens, Tibetan Buddhism's emphasis on daily practice is not an arbitrary tradition, but a strategic, compassionate approach to ensuring that death and what follows becomes a place of wisdom rather than bewilderment. The effort put in life pays dividends in death, revealing that the boundary between these states is not as rigid as we once believed. Sound, chant, and mantra occupy a fascinating niche within the Bardo Thurdo. They are more than decorative aspects of ritual. They constitute a direct technology for influencing consciousness. Western science has begun to uncover how certain frequencies can calm the nervous system, reduce stress, and even improve cognitive function. The Tibetan tradition, however, has explored these effects for centuries, employing them purposefully at the most vulnerable juncture death. A mantra like Om Mani Padme Hum, dedicated to the embodiment of compassion, resonates at levels beyond the intellect. Even someone unfamiliar with its meaning might feel a subtle shift when hearing it chanted repeatedly. The text underscores that in the Bardo, when rational faculties tied to the brain have dissolved, the vibrational impact of sound can penetrate directly to the soul's core. If the soul is swirling in illusions, hearing a familiar chant can act like a lighthouse, guiding it back to calmer, more compassionate waters. Likewise, the careful articulation of prayers and instructions by a lama or a loved one by the bedside is understood to establish a harmonizing field. When the outward senses of sight or touch are no longer accessible, the auditory vibration is believed to be among the last to fade. This is why reciting the Bardo Thurdo is considered so crucial in those first days and hours after the heart stops beating. The soul, though parted from the body, may still hear through a subtle sense that transcends physical ears. Beyond the immediate after-death context, chanting also instills beneficial mental habits while alive. Repetition fosters concentration, immersing the practitioner in a calming rhythm that counters everyday agitation. Simultaneously, the mantra's symbolic meaning, compassion, wisdom, or unconditional love seeps into the subconscious, gradually shaping one's worldview. When carried into the Bardo, these ingrained impressions can provide a steady footing amid swirling illusions. Moreover, chanting often goes hand in hand with visualization. In many Tibetan practices, the individual envisions themselves or a loved one enveloped in radiant light, or imagines a particular deity symbolizing compassion or wisdom. The synergy of sound and mental imagery can yield an immersive spiritual experience that resonates beyond rational thought. At death, these deeply imprinted images and vibrations can resurface to offer comfort and guidance. In the modern era, one doesn't need to be a scholar or even a devout Buddhist to benefit from this concept. The principle that sound and vibration can stabilize or elevate our mental state is accessible to anyone. Simple humming toning exercises or listening to certain music can help ground one's awareness. Equally, playing soothing mantras at a dying person's bedside, even if they do not consciously hear it, can create a supportive ambiance. While the Bardo Thurdo offers a specific blueprint, the underlying message is that our sonic environment directly influences our emotional and spiritual well-being. Thus, sound is far more than an artistic flourish. It is integral to the alchemy of transition. By shaping the vibratory field around us, we shape our inner field as well, creating a bridge that can carry us or our loved ones across that last frontier, whether spoken softly in a near-empty room or chanted in a grand monastery hall. These sacred sounds remind us that silent sound and awareness are inseparable allies on the path to liberation. Karma, a concept often referenced yet misunderstood, emerges in the Bardo Thodol as the soul's own energy blueprint. Rather than being a moral scoreboard, karma here is described as resonance, meaning that the soul is drawn toward experiences and states that match its energetic patterns. While alive, these patterns take shape through repetitive thoughts, emotions, and actions. Upon death, stripped of worldly distractions, one faces the pure reflection of what has been cultivated within. This reflection is immediate and direct. If anger was a persistent theme, it forms a gravitational pull, causing illusions or realms of existence that vibrate with that anger to manifest. The impetus is not to punish, but to mirror, so that the soul can see firsthand the reality it has been weaving. This is how the cycle of rebirth continues. The soul, unsettled by illusions or desires, gravitates toward physical or subtle realms that allow those energies to play out again. Yet the text also emphasizes the malleability of karma. Awareness can override these energetic pulls by illuminating their nature. It's not that old patterns vanish instantly, but rather that recognition, akin to flipping on a light in a dark room, removes the impetus for repeating the pattern. This is the essence of liberation, which is not about external redemption, but about seeing and releasing the internal causes of suffering. For those not versed in Tibetan cosmology, the idea that what you carry inside shapes your afterlife is not entirely alien. Many spiritual traditions and philosophies, from Gnostic Christianity to certain strains of Hinduism, affirm that our inner landscape exerts profound influence on our fate beyond physical life. The Bardo Thodol gives this principle a detailed stage-by-stage outline explaining exactly how illusions form, why they appear, and how they bind or liberate the soul. Karma also intersects with compassion. If, for instance, a person dedicated their life to selfless love, they create a karmic resonance of generosity. In the Bardo, that resonance can take the form of radiant, gentle visions, or it might lead the soul to choose reincarnation in a context where it can further cultivate compassion. Alternatively, if someone is so deeply moved by the suffering of beings that they vow to return and help, that vow becomes a karmic vector. They may incarnate as a bodhisattva, figure exemplifying and teaching compassion to others. Thus, karma is not exclusively about personal issues like anger or attachment. It also includes altruistic forces, vows, and intentions that direct the soul's path. This broader view dissolves the misconception that karma is purely about punishment. It is more accurately about continuity, cause and effect, and the unstoppable interplay between consciousness and experience. Moreover, the Tibetan Book of the Dead never fails to remind us that at any point, greater awareness can interrupt karmic momentum. If in the Bardo, the soul suddenly recognizes an illusion as its own creation, that moment can be a pivot toward enlightenment. This pivot can occur even for those who seemed mired in harmful actions during life, indicating a profound optimism in the text's viewpoint. No matter how entrenched a pattern is, a flash of insight can transform it. Hence, the invitation is clear. Recognizing karma as an internal magnet, we are encouraged to cultivate the energies we wish to see amplified in ourselves and in our future experiences. Whether in everyday life or beyond, this karmic awareness empowers us to be co-creators of our reality, rather than passive recipients of fate. As the soul journeys deeper into the Bardo, it encounters the Sidpa Bardo, sometimes referred to as the Bardo of Becoming. This stage revolves around the forces that propel consciousness toward a new incarnation if the soul does not attain final liberation. The Tibetan Book of the Dead describes how unfulfilled desires, attachments, or emotional resonances can act like magnets, drawing the soul into particular realms, wombs, or life circumstances. This process is neither random nor dictated by an external deity. Instead, it reflects the principle that like attracts like, and that the soul gravitates toward the conditions that mirror its unresolved energies. A longing for physical sensations, for example, might pull a consciousness toward a rebirth in a realm, human or otherwise, where such sensations can be explored. A fixated hatred or fear might lead to rebirth in a realm where that emotion is predominant, thereby continuing the cycle of suffering. However, even in this realm of becoming, the teachings hold out the possibility of recognition. If the soul realizes what is happening and has enough presence to let go of the attachments fueling these desires, it can avert reincarnation, or at least influence the conditions under which it reincarnates. The text outlines specific instructions. Do not be swayed by illusions of color and light. Do not be drawn by the promise of easy comfort or misled by illusions of grandeur. Remain in awareness. For many practitioners, this underscores the importance of not just living ethically, but also of consistently reflecting on the nature of desire. After all, the soul's energy is shaped by what it consistently craves or resists. The more self-knowledge we gain about our hidden longings, the less likely we are to be blindly led by them in the bardo. Instead, we can engage with desire in a healthier, more conscious way, even in life, recognizing it as a force that can either be transmuted into compassion and wisdom or left to spiral into further entanglement. Some people find parallels to near-death experiences reported in modern times. Individuals sometimes speak of being drawn to a brilliant light or hearing a powerful call, yet feeling there's unfinished business that pulls them back to their body. While these experiences are culturally and personally filtered, the underlying mechanics might align with the Bardo Thodol's depiction that we are, in essence, vibrational beings responding to inner and outer calls. In a broader sense, the Bardo Thodol does not romanticize the idea of reincarnation. It does not frame returning to earthly existence as a triumphant event, nor does it paint it as a condemnation. Rather, it presents it as another stage in the cosmic dance, a chance to continue learning, a chance to refine or heal unresolved parts of oneself. For some advanced practitioners, the choice to come back is made out of compassion, taking the vow to help others. For others, the return is made out of ignorance, craving, or fear. Both paths are recognized, but the text urges us to choose consciously if we can. Ultimately, this emphasis on the bardo of becoming highlights the text's overarching message. Awareness is the pivot upon which destiny turns. In that sense, whether we choose to be reborn or transcend altogether depends not on external arbiters, but on our capacity to see illusions for what they are, and to rest in the clear light of our own true nature. Dovetailing with the concept of self-awareness in the bardo is the idea that we can consciously refine our energetic field long before we ever approach death's threshold. While the Bardo Thodol lays out a roadmap for post-mortem navigation, it equally speaks to the living, urging them to practice daily. This is evident in countless Tibetan monasteries, where novices and advanced monks alike engage in rituals of visualization, chanting, and silent meditation. Yet the text's wisdom transcends monastic walls. Even in a bustling modern city, an individual can adopt these core principles, maintaining a mindful presence, engaging in acts of kindness, reflecting on mortality not as gloom, but as an impetus to live authentically. By doing so, we steadily dismantle the delusions of ego and the illusions of permanence that often dictate our actions. In parallel, we become more adept at perceiving hidden undercurrents in our psyche. One might ask, why focus so much on something that might happen decades from now? The Tibetan perspective is that mortality is not a distant event, but a companion that walks beside us daily. Recognizing this can imbue our lives with a vitality often lost in complacency. When we remember that each moment is finite, we are more inclined to show compassion, to forgive more freely, to love more expansively, and to see trivial irritations for what they are, fleeting clouds in an enormous sky. In addition, the Bardo Thödol addresses the importance of having a community, or at least a supportive environment. In Tibetan culture, the departure of a soul is rarely faced alone. Fellow practitioners, family members, or monastics gather to chant and encourage the soul to recognize illusions and merge with the clear light. This communal aspect extends to daily life where sanghas, spiritual communities, support each other in practicing mindfulness, virtue, and the letting go of harmful habits. For individuals who do not have access to a spiritual community, the text still inspires self-sufficiency through internal discipline. The recommended practices, mindfulness meditation, chanting, compassionate action, are portable and can be integrated into any lifestyle. The potential outcome is a soul that, upon leaving the body, has the best possible chance of navigating the bardo without succumbing to confusion. Another significant teaching is that even if one does not fully attain liberation in this lifetime or in the next, every step taken toward awareness reduces future suffering. The illusions in the bardo become less intimidating to a consciousness that has developed clarity, even if that clarity isn't perfect. The continuum of consciousness means that any spiritual progress made now is never lost. It influences subsequent incarnations and bardo experiences. In summary, the Bardo Thödol's lessons about how to die well simultaneously outline how to live well. Recognizing the ephemeral nature of all phenomena helps dissolve petty conflicts and attachments, freeing up energy for genuine insight and altruism. Engaging in meditative or ritual practices doesn't isolate individuals from life's hustle. Rather, it provides them with a refuge and a stable anchor, enabling them to re-enter the world with a clearer perspective. Thus, the dual focus on living and dying underscores the unity of these processes. Death is not an abrupt punctuation, but the culmination of how we have lived. To the extent that we cultivate wisdom and compassion in life, we ensure a more harmonious and potentially liberating transition in death. And according to the Bardo Thödol, this harmony and liberation is not just a personal victory, but a beacon that can inspire all who encounter us in life or beyond. The Tibetan Book of the Dead also puts a spotlight on the intricate relationship between fear and ignorance. Fear, it teaches, arises when we are ignorant of our true nature and the nature of phenomena. In daily life, we often fear losing our possessions, relationship status, or health. On a deeper level, we fear the loss of self, the dissolution of everything familiar. Death epitomizes that fear. But the Bardo Thödol reorients this if we see that self is not a rigid identity, but a fluid process of awareness. The collapse of external forms no longer equates to total annihilation. This perspective is revolutionary because it dismantles the primary basis of existential dread, the idea that I, as a separate entity, will vanish. Instead, The text suggests that what vanishes is the finite construct revealing a more expansive reality behind it. This reality is the clear light, a luminous consciousness that does not hinge on form. Many accounts of near-death experiences resonate with this, describing a sense of unity or unconditional acceptance in the face of what they initially feared as oblivion. However, the text also acknowledges that if the soul has never glimpsed or contemplated this unity, the brilliance of the clear light can be shocking or even perceived as threatening. This is akin to someone stepping out of a dark cave into midday sun. At first, the light blinds rather than enlightens. In that moment of shock, if we cling to old definitions of self, we recoil, turning away from the very freedom we unknowingly seek. Hence, Tibetan monasteries often encourage death yoga, a term referring to certain practices where one visualizes dying and consciously releasing each layer of identity. By rehearsing this process, the fear is gradually stripped away. Monastics might meditate on their own skeletons or the decomposition of the body, not out of morbid fascination, but as a direct confrontation with impermanence. Each reflection chips away at the ignorance that equates self with flesh and bone. For someone outside this tradition, these methods might seem extreme. Yet the principle can be adapted in simpler forms, frequently reflecting on impermanence, such as acknowledging that every sunrise is unique and every human encounter is fleeting, can cultivate a gentle familiarity with the concept that nothing stays the same. This acceptance of change reduces the shock when major transitions, including death, occur. The Bardo Thodol thus frames ignorance not as a moral failing, but as a kind of unexamined assumption about who we are and what reality is. Fear is the emotional signal of that ignorance. The cure in these teachings is direct insight. By examining our own minds, observing how thoughts arise and pass, how identities form and fade, we gain a living experience of impermanence and spaciousness. When eventually confronted with the biggest letting go, we can meet it with the same curious awareness we apply to smaller changes. The text is compassionate in acknowledging that not everyone will do this work and that many souls will indeed be frightened or confounded at the threshold. This is why communal support, chanting and instruction are provided after physical death in an effort to jog the soul's memory. Remember who you really are. That phrase reverberates as the core message bridging life and death. Once we remember, fear loses its power, and what remains is an abiding sense of awe at the boundless nature of existence. While the Bardo Thodol is deeply associated with Tibetan Buddhism, its teachings possess a universality that transcends religious boundaries. The text does not demand that one venerate the Buddha or adhere to monastic discipline. Rather, it points to universal truth about consciousness. Illusions stem from within. Attachment perpetuates suffering. Presence dissolves fear, and recognition of one's luminous essence paves the way to freedom. These ideas can resonate with mystics, philosophers, and seekers in countless traditions, from Christian contemplatives to secular mindfulness practitioners. This universality is reflected in how many modern spiritual teachers cite the Tibetan Book of the Dead, alongside texts like the Bhagavad Gita, the Tao Te Ching, or even the works of Plato, emphasizing that the nature of reality and the soul's journey is a topic explored by many cultures across millennia. Each tradition has its own symbolic language, but the underlying questions remain. Who are we beneath the surface? What happens when we release our physical form? How do we cultivate the clarity to face that transition with grace? In contemporary settings, the text might be invoked in hospice care, where practitioners introduce elements of the Bardo Thodol's guidance to comfort dying patients. By reminding them that hallucinations or visions, if they arise, are not necessarily random, monstrous, patients may find reassurance. If approached with open curiosity, these visions can be navigated rather than feared. Even if a full acceptance of Buddhist cosmology is absent, the principle that the mind state affects one's experience of dying rings true for many. Furthermore, psychologists sometimes draw parallels between the Bardo states and transitions in everyday life. A major life change, such as losing a job or going through a divorce, can be seen as a mini-Bardo, a space in which one's old identity dissolves and a new self has yet to emerge. Just as the departed soul might cling to illusions or find liberation in the afterlife, we can cling to old narratives or discover freedom in the middle of earthly upheaval. Such analogies underscore the text's message that Bardo is not limited to the literal after-death state. It can symbolize any intermediate space where the old has fallen away and the new has not yet consolidated. By practicing presence and recognition during these times, we develop a skill set that can apply both to everyday transitions and to the ultimate transition of death. At the heart of this universal relevance is compassion. The Bardo Thodol frequently mentions the compassionate impulse that draws some souls back into rebirth so they can guide others. This idea parallels the broader Mahayana Buddhist concept of the Bodhisattva, one who delays personal nirvana out of compassion for all beings who suffer. Compassion, therefore, is not a sentimental feeling, but a potent force that shapes destinies, forging connections across lifetimes and bridging perceived gaps between self and other. By grounding itself in compassion, the text maintains that no soul is irredeemably lost. Illusions can dissolve at any moment, revealing innate wisdom and love. This hopeful vision contrasts starkly with beliefs that cast the afterlife as irrevocably determined by one's deeds or confessions alone. Instead, the Bardo Thodol portrays life and death as a continuity of learning, healing, and awakening, a tapestry in which every thread, every breath can either tighten the knot of ignorance or loosen it toward enlightenment. In a world increasingly thirsting for interconnectedness and spiritual insight, the Tibetan Book of the Dead offers a map that does not end at the tomb. It shows how every moment lived, every intention held echoes beyond the horizon of physical senses, reminding us that the entire cosmos may well be a vast conscious playground for souls learning to remember who they truly are. Ultimately, the Tibetan Book of the Dead stands as an invitation to live more deeply, love more fully, and greet death not as the grim reaper, but as a final teacher. The text's very existence reflects a culture that refused to trivialize or avoid the reality of impermanence. Instead, it elevated the art of dying to the same level of reverence as living, guiding generations to meet their last breath with eyes wide open. In practical application, the text underscores that how we die mirrors how we live. If we have consistently run from discomfort, we might flee from the clear light. If we have deceived ourselves about our own anger, we might face frightening illusions that seem external, but are actually self-made. Conversely, if we have taken responsibility for our emotions, forgiven ourselves and others, cultivated tranquility, and recognized our deeper nature, death may arrive as a clarion call to finally merge with the luminous presence that is our birthright. One of the text's most comforting insights is that even if we falter at the moment of death, consumed by fear or attachment, we are not doomed. The illusions in the Bardo are dynamic. repeated chances for recognition appear as different visions or energies. At any point, the soul's internal posture can shift from panic to openness, dissolving illusions. While some might still end up returning to physical form, the lessons from that partial recognition carry over shaping future incarnations. This cyclical view underscores the kindness embedded in the cosmos, according to Tibetan cosmology. Additionally, the Bardo Thodol's instructions for the living daily meditations, mantras, mindful ethics, and regular reflection on death do more than prepare us for a singular event. They fundamentally alter how we engage with every facet of life. We learn to differentiate what is fleeting from what is essential, to relinquish petty obsessions for deeper joys, and to cultivate compassion that transcends personal gain. In essence, we learn to die to our smaller selves so we can live more expansively each day. For those who do not identify with Buddhism or any religion, the essential logic still resonates. Our mental and emotional patterns shape our experiences. Ignorance about these patterns can lead to unnecessary suffering. Awareness, on the other hand, can awaken us to our innate capacity for peace. Whether one believes in literal bardo states or views it all as metaphorical psychology, the call to face impermanence with courage and clarity remains relevant. This text also prompts us to reconsider how we treat the dying. Rather than isolating them in sterile rooms, might we offer them supportive words, comforting presences, or soothing music, an environment that mirrors the calm we hope they carry into the bardo. Even if we can't fully subscribe to the specifics of Tibetan ritual, we can adopt the principle that gentle awareness and love can guide someone through their last moments more effectively than fear or confusion. As we arrive at the conclusion of this long reflection on the Bardo Thodol, we circle back to its primary function. It is a guide, not a dogma. It holds up a mirror in which we see both life and death as part of a grand, ongoing dance of consciousness. We can choose to look away, or we can look deeply, discovering that the illusions we have dreaded are in fact stepping stones to awakening. If we seize that truth, death stops being an end and becomes an initiation, a return to the source, where we see that what dies is only form, while awareness itself shines on untouched and unbroken. A further dimension of the Tibetan Book of the Dead's significance lies in how it speaks to the collective and not just the personal aspect of spiritual evolution. While its instructions primarily address the individual soul's journey through the bardos, the text weaves in the understanding that our consciousness is inherently interwoven with that of others. From the Mahayana Buddhist perspective, there is no ultimate liberation that isolates one being from the collective web of life. Instead, true realization expands into a profound sense of empathy and responsibility for all creatures, reflecting the Bodhisattva ideal, the vow to keep returning until every last being attains freedom from illusion and suffering. In practical terms, this means that the soul navigating the post-death realms is not merely on a solitary quest. Each choice it makes to cling to illusions or to recognize them ripples outward, influencing the karmic tapestry into which it may later incarnate. If the soul returns with unfulfilled anger or attachment, it may manifest that energy in the next life, affecting family, community, and society. Conversely, a soul that dissolves a measure of ignorance or animosity contributes to a more harmonious, energetic field, whether or not it re-enters a physical form. In this light, the teachings underscore that spiritual awakening is not a self-centered pursuit. It has echoes that touch countless others across incarnations. Likewise, the communal aspect of ritual around death in Tibetan culture is a testament to this collective orientation. When a lama or a group of monks gathers to chant for a departed person, they are not merely providing individual comfort. They are also fortifying a field of compassion in which the soul can find steadiness. Meanwhile, the living participants reinforce their own understanding of impermanence and interconnectedness. The synergy of these acts deepens the insight that no single being's journey is sealed off from the rest of existence. Beyond the confines of Tibetan Buddhism, this collective ethos echoes in other spiritual frameworks as well. Indigenous communities around the world often hold communal ceremonies seeing the departure of one member as a passage that affects the entire tribe. Whether in ancient Egyptian rites or in modern interfaith ceremonies, the recognition that death is a universal rite of passage frequently inspires group prayer, shared vigil, and the offering of blessings. These parallels highlight a unifying human impulse to rally around the threshold of death with intention and reverence. At a psychological level, viewing death through a collective lens can also ease the burden of fear. If we recognize that we are part of a continuum of consciousness, then the anxiety of personal extinction softens into an awareness that what we contribute, our acts of kindness, our measure of understanding, persist in the larger web. From this vantage point, the call of the Bardo Thodol to master one's mental states takes on added weight. We do not do this work for ourselves alone, but on behalf of a vast interdependent tapestry of sentient life. Ultimately, this recognition dovetails with the text's repeated emphasis on compassion. We cultivate clarity, not only so that we can gracefully navigate illusions, but so we can become more effective vessels of compassion in every realm we inhabit. By dissolving personal delusions, we reduce collective suffering. By honoring the communal aspect of death, we spark a shared awakening that reverberates well beyond a single body's lifespan. One could argue that the Tibetan Book of the Dead is as much a psychological treatise as it is a spiritual one. Contemporary psychologists and scholars have observed how its detailed accounts of wrathful deities, peaceful deities, and luminous displays in the Bardo can be read as symbolic representations of the unconscious mind. The mind, freed from the usual filters and routines of embodied life, encounters its own latent potentials, both the repressed wrathful and the idealized peaceful archetypes. In Jungian terms, these might correspond to the shadow, the anima, animus, and other primordial images collectively shaping the collective unconscious. Where the Bardo Thodol transcends a purely psychological model, however, is in how it prescribes direct experiential methods for facing and integrating these archetypal forces. Rather than merely labeling them as unconscious contents, the text teaches the departed soul to engage them with awareness, ultimately recognizing them as expressions of mind's luminosity. At the same time, it urges the reader, who is after all still among the living, to train in these recognitions while conscious, so that the final transition does not descend into chaos. In the modern therapeutic environment, there are echoes of this approach. Techniques such as guided visualization, active imagination, and deep meditation invite individuals to encounter their inner images and transform their relationship to them. The difference is that the Bardo Thodol situates this process at the edge of life and beyond, where illusions become hyper-real. Yet the principle remains consistent. Illusions lose their power when they are recognized, named, and accepted as part of a grander spectrum of consciousness. Moreover, the text underscores that these illusions can arise from myriad causes, karmic imprints, ancestral influences, collective energies, personal traumas. The illusions are not necessarily evil, but they can be terrifying if the soul forgets its inherent sovereignty. By addressing these illusions as mental fabrications, the text offers a non-dual framework. No image is absolutely external. It is a projection of the mind and can be reabsorbed through mindful recognition. In psychological language, we might say that unexamined contents of the psyche become demons, but once integrated, they reveal hidden strengths or clarities. Another intriguing parallel with psychology is the notion of unfinished business. Many contemporary grief counselors and near-death researchers observe that dying individuals may experience mental unrest if they harbor unresolved conflicts, unspoken apologies, or deep regrets. The Bardo Thodol similarly teaches that attachments and unresolved emotions crystallize in the bardo as illusions or draws toward rebirth. The spiritual counsel, complete what you can make amends, release grudges, mirrors modern therapeutic advice, reinforcing the universal relevance of these ancient teachings. By blending these insights, the Tibetan Book of the Dead anticipates what modern psychological and therapeutic fields are only beginning to articulate, that the boundary between inner and outer realities is more porous than we imagine. Whether we label it as unconscious content or karmic imprint, the process of meeting and integrating these forces hinges on self-awareness, compassion, and the willingness to face what we have long avoided. In that sense, the text serves as both a mystical manual and a profound blueprint for inner healing, bridging centuries of wisdom with the frontiers of contemporary mental health. Crucial to appreciating the Bardo Thodol in its full context is understanding how it is traditionally studied and preserved. Tibetan Buddhist lineages are characterized by careful oral transmission from teacher to disciple, ensuring that the nuanced meanings of the text are neither lost nor diluted. While the book itself can be translated into dozens of languages, offering broad accessibility, there is a depth that blossoms when one engages with a qualified teacher who has spent years, if not decades, meditating on these principles. In a conventional Tibetan setting, the student might receive empowerments or specific instructions on how to read chant and interpret the text. Certain passages are recited daily, ingraining the words so they become second nature, an almost reflexive recitation that arises whenever the mind drifts or fear intrudes. This memorization is not a rote exercise, but a method of ensuring that at the moment of death, the practitioner can recollect the teaching spontaneously despite any disorienting illusions. Moreover, the text is not viewed as an isolated scripture. It's often accompanied by commentaries from esteemed masters such as Karma Lingpa Padmasambhava, to whom parts of the text are attributed, and a range of lineage holders who expound on its hidden layers. These commentaries clarify the symbolic language, contextualize the role of deities, and adapt the instructions to varying cultural shifts over time. They also highlight the interplay between the Bardo Thodol and related practices like Fowo, the transference of consciousness at the time of death. This layered approach underscores that the teachings aren't merely philosophical. They are intimately woven into daily life. From dawn prayers to evening dedications, Tibetan practitioners cultivate a lifestyle that constantly reminds them of impermanence. Even mundane tasks become opportunities to reflect on the ephemeral nature of existence and the potential illusions that can arise when we cling to the fleeting. This immersion shapes a mindset where death is not relegated to the final hour, but integrated as a muse for spiritual vigilance. Modern readers or spiritual seekers may not have the benefit of such an immersive environment, yet they can still glean significant insights. insights. While an oral lineage offers a kind of concentrated wisdom, the textual translations and scholarly work on the Bardo Thodol allow many people worldwide to incorporate its lessons. Some integrate these teachings into a secular mindfulness practice, focusing on the universal messages of impermanence, the mind-created nature of experience, and the liberating power of recognition. Ultimately, the preservation of the Tibetan Book of the Dead through generations highlights its living power. The text is not a museum piece, but a dynamic resource continuously reinterpreted and refreshed by those who commit to understanding its import. Its longevity and impact testify to its resonance with human hearts across cultures and eras. Even as technology and lifestyles change, the mystery of death remains, and so does the call to approach it with clarity and grace. That call resonates as strongly today as it did centuries ago, reminding us that the final frontier of consciousness can be navigated with courage, provided we start the journey of inquiry and practice now. Another powerful aspect of the Bardo Thodol is its insistence on bringing a spirit of compassion into every phase of existence, including the seemingly fear-filled realms after death. Compassion here is not merely an emotional sentiment or a fleeting wish for someone else's well-being. It is a living force that shapes the mind's resonance. When extended toward ourselves, compassion pacifies harsh self-criticism and dismantles the illusions of shame or unworthiness. When extended toward others, compassion melts boundaries that might otherwise lead us into defensive or aggressive reactions, both in life and in the afterlife. In Tibetan Buddhism, the figure of the Bodhisattva captures this compassionate ideal, one who could attain ultimate liberation, yet chooses to return to help ease the suffering of other beings. By internalizing this model, practitioners understand that every moment, every breath is a chance to awaken deeper empathy. In the Bardo, such empathy acts as a protective and guiding light. If fearsome visions arise, the ability to respond with compassion instead of terror can transform the ordeal into a crucible of growth. Translating this into daily life compassion means noticing our habitual reactivity toward others and ourselves. We might see that we're quick to judge or to lash out when threatened. Recognizing these patterns, we can train ourselves to pause and offer kindness, even if it's a silent wish for well-being. Over time, these small acts of daily compassion accumulate into a robust habit of the heart. By the time we face the ultimate transition, our default setting is no longer self-preservation at all costs, but an openness to helping or understanding whatever arises, including illusions. Moreover, the Bardo Thodol describes how in the post-death realms, the illusions we encounter can reflect our level of compassion or lack thereof. For example, if we harbor deep-seated resentments or grudges, these can surface as menacing apparitions. The text offers a remedy. Remember compassion, see these apparitions as emanations of unhealed anger or hurt, and extend kindness to them. By doing so, we effectively self-liberate from the illusions, turning them into doorways rather than barriers. This dynamic underscores the idea that compassion is not purely about moral goodness. It is also a strategic tool for navigating consciousness. When the heart radiates love or understanding, illusions lose their bite. Rage, fear, and guilt find no foothold in a mind that recognizes them as transient energies longing for transformation. Whether in day-to-day conflicts or in the grand illusions of the Bardo, compassion is the medicine that dissolves the walls of separation. An equally important facet is self-compassion, honoring one's own fears and regrets without letting them solidify into self-condemnation. The text assures us that missing an opportunity for immediate liberation is not the end. We can still learn, adapt, and move forward even within the various bardo states. This gentle, patient view allows us to hold our own missteps in kindness, ensuring we remain receptive to growth rather than locked in shame. Ultimately, compassion becomes a binding thread that unifies the living with the dying, the mundane with the sacred, and the individual with the collective. It is the very heartbeat of the Bardo Thodol's teachings, reminding us that no matter how terrifying or confusing the illusions, a simple shift toward empathy can turn turmoil into a pathway toward awakening. A related quality lauded by the Bardo Thodol is his equanimity, a state of balanced mind that remains steady, regardless of whether experiences are pleasant or unpleasant. When illusions are lovely, glowing beings, peaceful landscapes, or heavenly music, the mind can become attached, chasing the euphoria. When illusions are frightening, roaring deities, ominous darkness, or chaotic sounds, the mind can recoil, fueling panic. Equanimity stands as the middle pillar, enabling the soul to see all appearances as momentary expressions of consciousness. In Tibetan Buddhist practice, equanimity is nurtured alongside compassion, sympathetic joy, and loving kindness, forming the four immeasurables. Each immeasurable addresses a facet of human emotion. Loving kindness, metta, maitri, extends a wish for all beings to be happy. Compassion, karuna, focuses on the wish to alleviate suffering. Sympathetic joy, mudita, delights in the well-being of others. Equanimity, upekkha, upeksha, maintains balance amid all fluctuations. When carried into the bardo, these immeasurables serve as a robust toolkit. Equanimity specifically helps the soul remain undisturbed by the illusions, neither seduced by heavenly visions nor terrorized by hellish ones. From a psychological standpoint, equanimity breaks the habit of reactivity, allowing for a clearer, more insightful response to stimuli. If a peaceful deity appears and invites worship, an equanimous mind recognizes the deity as a reflection of its own compassion. It neither denies the beauty nor tries to cling to it. If a wrathful deity roars and threatens, the mind sees it as energy manifesting from within, acknowledging it without recoiling. Applied to daily life, equanimity translates into a resilience that weathers emotional storms. If we have practiced maintaining composure during minor frustrations, a harsh comment at work, an unexpected expense, an argument with a friend, then encountering the illusions of the bardo becomes less daunting. By cultivating the habit of pausing, breathing, and observing, we train our consciousness to remain spacious and untroubled even when stirred by powerful impressions. For many people, equanimity can seem challenging because we habitually classify experiences as good or bad, craving or aversion. Yet the Bardo Thodol's perspective invites us to see these classifications as mental overlays. The illusions themselves are neutral energy shaped by our labeling. By dropping the labels, we can meet each phenomenon with calm curiosity. This shift is not about numbness or apathy. Rather, it's about meeting everything from daily inconveniences to cosmic illusions with a steady mind that is neither lulled into complacency nor provoked into fear. This steady mind is particularly crucial at the threshold of death, when old reflexes might surge. In the final moments, if we have ingrained equanimity, we can greet the dissolution of the body and the potential onslaught of illusions with a poised consciousness. The text suggests this poised mind is the gateway to recognizing the clear light, unperturbed by the drama of dying. Hence, equanimity is more than a pleasant character trait. It is a core survival skill on the inner plane, safeguarding the soul from being buffeted by every shift and swirl. It may help to frame the Bardo Thurdol's roadmap as a profound journey of initiation. Many ancient cultures, from Eleusinian mysteries in Greece to certain secret rites of the Maya or Egyptians, employed symbolic death and rebirth rituals to initiate individuals into higher wisdom. The premise was that undergoing a controlled encounter with the dissolution of ego or identity would prepare the initiate for a deeper understanding of life and a calmer acceptance of mortality. In Tibetan Buddhism, the entire text can be viewed as an extended commentary on this initiatory process, except it is designed for the actual event of death rather than a purely symbolic ceremony. In these older initiatic traditions, participants often faced ordeals, symbolic descents into the underworld, confrontations with monstrous figures, or labyrinthine passages testing their resolve. The parallels with the Bardo realms are striking. Wrathful deities, illusions of torment, or tempting illusions of paradise are akin to the tasks in a mythic labyrinth. Passing through these tests requires presence, self-knowledge, and a willingness to face the unknown. Ultimately, the goal is similar: to emerge with a renewed or transformed consciousness that recognizes the deeper reality beyond appearances. Where the Bardo Thurdol innovates is in its systematic instructions offered not only to a ceremonial initiate, but to every individual facing death. The text exemplifies a democratization of esoteric knowledge. No longer do only a select group within a temple or secret society learn how to navigate the afterlife. In Tibetan culture, the text is recited openly, ensuring that even lay people grasp the basics of how illusions form and how they can be dissolved. This does not mean the text is simplistic or easy to assimilate. Far from it. But the accessibility of the chanting and the wide circulation of the Bardo Thurdol reflect a cultural ethos. Dying well is a universal right and a communal responsibility. Everyone should have the opportunity to meet death with some measure of awareness. This perspective differs from cultures that sequester death in hospitals out of public sight, leaving many to pass away without spiritual support or guidance. From a spiritual vantage point, one might say that each of us is already in a kind of bardo and intermediate state right now. We inhabit a realm where things are constantly changing. Our identities are in flux and illusions can grip us at any moment. The Bardo Thurdol's teachings about recognition, letting go, compassion, and equanimity apply just as aptly to these everyday illusions as they do to the post-death illusions. In that sense, engaging with the text is like enrolling in a lifelong initiation, where each day we learn to confront smaller illusions, so we'll be ready for the grand illusions at life's end. Thus, the text bridges two worlds: the cosmic final threshold and the mundane realities we navigate daily. Each read, each chant, each reflection on impermanence is an initiation into the deeper mysteries of consciousness. By honoring this initiatory arc, we transform both our approach to living and to dying, seeing them not as separate events, but as intertwined passages in an ongoing journey of awakening. An often overlooked element of the Bardo Thurdol is its artistry, the poetic and symbolic language that permeates its descriptions. Terms like clear light, wrathful deities, and peaceful deities are not just technical labels. They carry an evocative power designed to resonate at multiple levels of the psyche. In Tibetan traditions, language itself is seen as an energetic force capable of shaping mind states. This is why the text is recited aloud to the deceased, and why every word, rhythm, and pause is carefully considered. On a superficial level, one could read the Bardo Thurdol's references to Buddhas with many arms or furious expressions and dismiss them as mere mythological flourishes. However, the depth of the text emerges when we appreciate the archetypal significance. A wrathful deity, for instance, might be depicted with flame skulls or fangs, not to depict literal violence, but to symbolize the purifying destructive power that dissolves illusions. The artistry of these images engages the emotional center of the listener or reader, ensuring that the lessons penetrate beyond intellectual understanding. Similarly, the clear light is more than a phrase. It points to a sublime, indescribable luminosity that one might experience at the cusp of the final breath. This luminosity is said to be the pure nature of mind itself, unencumbered by conceptual thought. Poetic language helps evoke the ineffability of this experience. If it were described merely as the mind's true essence, it could sound dry or abstract. But describing it as a radiance brighter than 1,000 suns, yet soothing and without heat, touches the heart, awakening a sense of awe and reverence. The Bardo Thurdol's poetic approach thus serves a dual function. First, it ensures the teachings are memorable. In an oral culture, mnemonic devices like repetition, vivid imagery, and melodic chanting are essential for retention. Second, it helps bypass the purely logical faculties, allowing the deeper layers of consciousness where archetypes and emotions dwell to absorb the teaching. This matters significantly for the after-death scenario, where the rational mind may no longer be fully operative, but symbolic resonance could still reach the soul. In modern contexts, we can derive inspiration from this approach by integrating art, music, or creative expression into our contemplation of impermanence. Whether through painting, writing poetry, or dancing, we can embody the truths of the Bardo Thurdol in forms that resonate with our emotional and intuitive sides. Doing so may prepare us in a way that logical study alone cannot, bridging the gap between conceptual knowledge and transformative insight. Thus, the text's richly symbolic and artistic dimension underscores that spiritual truths often need more than straightforward prose to fully engage the human heart. By immersing ourselves in these symbols, chants, and evocative descriptions, we become receptive at a deeper level, laying the groundwork for recognition when illusions, be they daily confusions or post-mortem visions, arise. The artistry ensures that the teachings live not just in our minds, but in our imaginations and our souls, ready to guide us whenever the veil of ordinary perception is torn aside. Alongside art and symbolism, ritual objects also factor prominently into the Tibetan approach to death in the teachings of the Bardo Thurdol. Monasteries and practitioners often utilize items like furbas, ritual daggers, thankas, sacred paintings, malas, prayer beads, bells, and dammerous drums during ceremonies. Each object holds a specific energetic and symbolic significance. Purba symbolizes cutting through negativity and illusions. Thanka depicts deities or mandalas, serving as visual gateways to meditation. Mala helps keep count of mantras, maintaining a steady rhythm of prayer. Bell and Damaru represent wisdom and skillful means creating sound vibrations that align with specific spiritual frequencies. In many cases, these items are used in conjunction with the recitation of texts like the Bardo Thurdol. For example, A lama might sound the bell at key points to signal the transition from one section of the reading to another, reinforcing the shift in consciousness being described. The visual presence of a thangka depicting wrathful deities can help the listener or the one departing recognize that fearsome illusions are part of the path. In a sense, these objects serve as physical anchors that tie ritual action to spiritual intention. From an outside perspective, it might appear as though these implements are superstitious props. However, within the Tibetan worldview, material objects are not dismissed as inert. Rather, they're seen as vessels or conduits for specific energies. When consecrated by prayers and intention, they carry a resonance that can steady the mind, much like a photograph of a loved one can evoke powerful emotions, even without words. In the Bardo, such resonances are believed to help the departed soul orient itself when faced with swirling illusions. Even for those not steeped in Tibetan cultural practices, there's something universally accessible in the idea of using tangible items to remind us of intangible truth. Many spiritual traditions encourage creating a sacred space at home with meaningful objects, candles, stones, or icons that evoke the qualities we wish to cultivate, such as peace or compassion. In the context of dying, having certain objects in the room, a beloved photograph, a calming piece of art, or a small altar can ease the transition by focusing the individual's mind on love, gratitude, or trust rather than fear. Ritual objects also support communal participation. Family members who are unsure how to help can ring a bell, light incense, or place a mala in the hand of the one departing. These simple acts transform anxiety into constructive engagement, offering tangible gestures of care and spiritual support. This shared action resonates with the text's communal ethos. Death need not be a lonely voyage if loved ones and fellow practitioners come together to hold space. Ultimately, the presence of ritual objects in Bardo Thurdo practices highlights the interconnectedness of body, mind, and environment. What we touch, see, and hear can significantly influence our inner states. By consciously shaping the outer environment with objects aligned to spiritual values, we create a conducive backdrop for the soul's passage, reinforcing the text's teachings that liberation hinges on consistent, mindful engagement with every layer of our being, physical, emotional, and beyond. An intriguing angle on the Bardo Thudol is how it can inform approaches to grief and bereavement among those left behind after someone passes. While the text directly addresses the journey of the soul, it also subtly guides the living to respond to death with reverence, clarity, and compassion, rather than despair or denial. In Tibetan tradition, the period immediately after death is not just about the departed soul. It's also a time for the living to reflect on their own attachments and to offer supportive prayers. When a loved one dies, those who remain often experience a bardo-like state themselves, a space of confusion, emotional turbulence, and a sense of unreality. The text's teachings on impermanence and illusion can be a source of solace, reminding mourners that physical separation is a natural part of life. Simultaneously, the instructions for chanting or reading the Bardo Thudol provide a purposeful activity that channels grief into a constructive ritual. Instead of ruminating on regrets or what-ifs, the bereaved can focus on sending compassionate energy and clarity to the departed, effectively participating in their spiritual journey. This ritualistic engagement can help ease the painful gap that grief creates, providing a sense of continuity and meaning. Mourners might gather daily to recite the text or to join group prayers in a local temple, ensuring that the departed soul's name is included in the chanting. This communal aspect softens the isolating effects of grief and reinforces the message that death touches everyone, eventually binding the community together in shared experience. Moreover, the text encourages the living to face their own mortality in the wake of a loss. Observing the finality of a loved one's physical form can trigger a re-evaluation of personal priorities. We might ask, if death is certain, how do I want to live? The Bardo Thurdle does not shy away from such existential questions. Instead, it harnesses them as catalysts for spiritual growth. By pondering the illusions that shape our daily struggles, we can become more mindful, more compassionate, and more intent on using our limited time wisely. In certain Western contexts, grief counseling and palliative care teams have begun integrating mindfulness practices, guided imagery, or gentle ritual elements that echo the Tibetan ethos. While these may not replicate the precise chants of the Bardo Thurdle, they address the same human longing for meaningful closure and spiritual reassurance. This cross-cultural adoption underscores the universal need to frame death as part of a larger journey, rather than an abrupt ending devoid of hope or purpose. By helping both the dying and the living to see death within a continuum of consciousness, the Bardo Thurdle fosters a more holistic understanding of loss. Grief becomes an invitation to deepen compassion, reflect on impermanence, and unite in a shared ritual that honors the departed, while guiding the living toward greater awareness. In this way, the text's influence extends far beyond the deceased, nurturing healing and transformation for those who remain in the wake of mortality's unalterable truth. In considering the global influence of the Tibetan Book of the Dead, one can't overlook how the modern West discovered this text and became fascinated by its themes. Translations of the Bardo Thurdle began appearing in the early 20th century, introducing audiences to concepts of rebirth, the continuity of consciousness, and the vivid descriptions of afterlife states. Figures like Walter Evans Wentz, who published one of the earliest English renderings, helped popularize it, though scholars sometimes debated the accuracy of his interpretations. Over the decades, the text's reputation spread among spiritual seekers, counter-cultural movements of the 1960s, and academics interested in comparative religion. Psychologist Timothy Leary even drew parallels between the Bardo Thurdle and psychedelic experiences, publishing The Psychedelic Experience, a manual based on the Tibetan Book of the Dead, linking the dissolution of ordinary perception under psychedelics to the illusions described in the Bardo. Although controversial, this application illustrated the text's adaptability to different experiential frameworks. Subsequent translations by more linguistically and culturally immersed scholars such as Francesca Fremantle, Chogyam Trungpa, and Gurme Dorje offer deeper insights and rectified misunderstandings. These works emphasize the text's spiritual integrity and underscore the importance of lineage-based commentary. The popularization of Tibetan Buddhism in the West, partly through the presence of the Dalai Lama, further piqued interest in the Bardo Thurdle. For many Western readers and practitioners, it became a doorway to Buddhist philosophy, revealing the intimate connection between meditative practice and how one faces mortality. Notably, as Western hospice and palliative care evolved, some practitioners and caregivers began drawing inspiration from Tibetan end-of-life teachings. While not always adopting the full ritual system, they introduced ideas like guided visualization, the reading of comforting texts, or gentle reminders of impermanence to soothe patients and families. This cross-pollination enriched Western approaches to dying, demonstrating that even if one does not accept all aspects of the Tibetan cosmology, the emphasis on presence and compassion resonates universally. Over time, the Bardo Thodol has become part of a broader conversation about consciousness studies, near-death research, and the exploration of mystical states. It appears in university courses on comparative religion and philosophy, inspiring lively debates on whether it should be interpreted literally, symbolically, or both. For many, the literal scope of dazzling visions and post-mortem realms is balanced by a psychological or metaphorical appreciation, acknowledging that even if these realms exist beyond our common perception, they speak to fundamental human concerns about fear, clinging, and the potential for liberation. Today, with digital connectivity, one can easily access multiple translations and commentaries, watch recorded teachings by Tibetan lamas, or join online communities exploring the Bardo teachings. This accessibility ensures that the text continues to evolve in interpretation, bridging cultures and centuries. At its core, the Bardo Thodol remains a testament to the timeless human quest to understand and navigate the ultimate mystery, our own mortality, and to do so with wisdom, courage, and love. A further area in which the Bardo Thodol has left its imprint is in Western mindfulness movements that extend beyond end-of-life care. The rise of secular mindfulness programs, often derived from Buddhist traditions, has led many participants to explore core concepts like impermanence, non-attachment, and self-inquiry. Even though these programs might not overtly reference the Tibetan Book of the Dead, they carry an undercurrent of the same insights, namely that the mind's reactions shape our reality, and that recognizing impermanence can diminish suffering. For individuals who delve more deeply into Buddhist texts after an initial exposure to mindfulness, the Bardo Thodol can become a capstone revealing the deeper, more esoteric terrain that underlies seemingly practical mindfulness. Notably, some meditation teachers draw from the Bardo Thodol's portrayal of illusions in their instructions about mental phenomena. During retreat settings, teachers may remind practitioners that the mind can produce all manner of imagery. Emotional waves and cognitive distortions, essentially mini-bardos within a single meditation session. By regarding these internal events as akin to the illusions described in the text, meditators cultivate a healthy detachment and curiosity rather than becoming overwhelmed or fixated. This microcosmic training echoes the macrocosmic drama of the after-death Bardo, reinforcing the principle that how you do one thing is how you do everything. Additionally, some Western psychotherapists, particularly those integrating contemplative traditions into their practice, have discovered parallels between the Bardo Thodol's instructions and the process of helping clients confront shadow material, old traumas, fears, or suppressed desires. Just as the soul in the Bardo must recognize wrathful or peaceful deities as expressions of its own mind, so too must therapy clients often learn to see their nightmares and anxieties as parts of themselves rather than external threats. By fostering this recognition in a therapeutic setting, the client gains a measure of liberation akin to what the Bardo Thodol promises on a more cosmic scale. On the academic front, universities increasingly offer interdisciplinary courses on death and dying, blending religious studies, philosophy, psychology, and sociology. The Tibetan Book of the Dead frequently features as a prime example of how non-Western cultures conceptualize and ritualize mortality. Students encounter the text's detailed descriptions of the Bardo stages and compare them with, for instance, the Christian purgatory, ancient Egyptian funerary texts, or modern secular attitudes that prefer clinical silence around death. Such comparative analysis not only expands cultural literacy, but also sparks personal introspection about mortality, something many students might not otherwise engage with until later in life. Indeed, for a culture often accused of denying or sanitizing death, contact with the Bardo Thurdol can be jarring. It pulls no punches in depicting the potency of consciousness after the body falls away. Yet this starkness can also be liberating. Readers may find they are better equipped to handle the mystery and inevitability of mortality if they have at least entertained the text's perspective. Even if they do not adopt every detail of the Tibetan cosmology, the underlying message that awareness, compassion, and presence are the true bulwarks against fear can resonate across belief systems and personal philosophies. In exploring the Bardo Thurdol's rich tapestry, one may wonder about the roles of lineage teachers known in Tibetan Buddhism as lamas or rinpoches. These highly trained individuals often spend years, sometimes decades, studying canonical texts, commentaries, and lineage-specific instructions. They also engage in extensive solitary retreats where they delve into practices designed to stabilize the mind and familiarize themselves with subtle states of consciousness. By the time they teach or guide someone through the Bardo readings, they have ideally internalized the text's essence, allowing them to transmit not just words, but a certain spiritual resonance. This transmission is crucial in the Tibetan system. The Lama's presence and voice are believed to carry an energetic blessing that can cut through the confusion of the newly deceased soul. Because the soul may still cling to earthly illusions, hearing the words from a spiritually realized person can act as a clarion, call a reminder to shift focus toward the luminous ground of being. Even if the soul does not consciously grasp every instruction, the vibration of the Lama's chant is said to penetrate on a deeper, more intuitive level. Parallel to this in living disciples, the Lama's teachings help anchor a direct understanding of how illusions form and dissolve. Students learn not just by reading the Bardo Thurdol, but by reflecting on the Lama's oral commentaries, engaging in question and answer sessions, and participating in guided meditations that simulate the after-death stages. Some advanced practitioners even undertake dark retreats, living in total darkness for extended periods to invoke Bardo-like visions and practice recognition in a controlled environment. For Westerners who do not have easy access to such a teacher, many recorded teachings, online courses, and textual commentaries now exist. While nothing can fully replace the potency of in-person guidance, these resources can still provide substantial insights. Contemporary Buddhist teachers like the Dalai Lama, Mingyur, Rinpoche, Pema Chodron, and others have published works or given talks that illuminate Bardo teachings in accessible language, bridging cultural and conceptual gaps. Moreover, certain Western practitioners have taken monastic vows within Tibetan Buddhism or have become deeply immersed in these lineages, eventually teaching the Bardo instructions themselves. This cross-cultural transmission has contributed to a growing global Sangha community where members practice Bardo-related rites or recitations for deceased friends and relatives, whether in traditional Buddhist enclaves or in private gatherings worldwide. The significance of this teacher-student chain cannot be overstated. Tibetan Buddhism, with its emphasis on the guru-disciple relationship, views the Bardo Thurdol as more than a book to be passively read. It is a living document that comes to life fully in the dynamic interaction between informed, compassionate teachers and earnest, open-hearted students. Such relational learning ensures that the wisdom of the bardo doesn't become ossified into dogma, but continues to adapt, flourish, and guide minds across cultural boundaries and historical epochs. In this seamless continuity, the text preserves its vibrancy, functioning as both an ancient masterpiece and a modern practical guide to the mysteries of consciousness. An intriguing facet of the Bardo Thurdol is the precise detail it provides regarding the temporal sequence of events in the Bardo. Traditional commentary often breaks down the post-mortem experience into days with certain illusions or deities appearing on specific intervals, sometimes referred to as the 1st to the 49th day. While these divisions can be literal in Tibetan tradition, they can also be read metaphorically. Each day symbolizes a phase of unfolding awareness, a progressive display of the mind's luminous or shadowy contents. At each stage, the text instructs the soul with messages like, "Do not be afraid of the wrathful deity who appears on the 8th day. Recognize that it is your own mind." Such specificity serves two functions. First, it acts as a mnemonic device for the reader or chanter. Having a structured timeline helps them recall which illusions might be most likely at any given point, ensuring the guidance remains relevant. Second, it imbues the entire post-death experience with a sense of order. Rather than viewing it as a random, chaotic swirl, the soul is encouraged to trust that there is an underlying sequence, a curriculum of sorts. For modern interpreters, these day-by-day instructions can raise questions. Are we to take them literally, as if the consciousness experience is a linear timeline after the body dies? Or should we interpret them symbolically as successive layers of unveiling that might occur in a timeless, dreamlike fashion? Tibetan scholarship offers multiple perspectives. Some hold firmly to the literal approach, pointing to cultural evidence that communities do prayers for specific intervals following death. Others suggest a more psychological or symbolic reading. In either case, the text's essential message, "Recognize illusions as your mind's display," remains intact. This sequence also resonates with the idea that the bardo is not a single uniform state, but a series of sub-states or micro-transitions. Each sub-state reveals a new layer of perception, from the immediate confusion after the last breath, the Chikai Bardo, to encounters with peaceful deities, the Chonyid Bardo, to wrathful deities, and beyond wrathful aspects often appear in the latter days, culminating in the Sidpa Bardo, where the soul feels pulled toward rebirth. By traversing these phases, the soul gains multiple opportunities for recognition and liberation. If it fails to realize its true nature in one phase, there may still be a chance in the next. From a practical standpoint, these instructions remind the living that the journey of the soul may not be instantaneous. Rather than assuming the soul's fate is sealed at the moment of death, Tibetan ritual typically continues for weeks, sometimes culminating on the 49th day with special prayers or offerings. This extended practice underscores the belief that consciousness remains in flux and receptive to guidance, at least for a time. It is a consoling thought for loved ones who can feel that their efforts in recitation or prayer genuinely make a difference. Thus, the Bardo timeline, be it literal, symbolic, or both, provides scaffolding for the soul's journey. It demonstrates that even in the realm of post-death mystery, there is a structure that can be navigated, and that hope for liberation persists at every turn, provided the soul remains open to recognizing the illusions for what they truly are. As we explore the myriad layers of the Bardo Thurdol, it becomes evident that the text essentially teaches a single skill recognition. All the elaborate descriptions of wrathful and peaceful forms, the orchestration of mantras, and the emphasis on letting go. Funnel down to a core instruction. Recognize that this is your own mind. Whether you call it an illusion, a projection, or a manifestation, every phenomenon in the bardo arises from the luminous creativity of consciousness itself. This theme of recognition is hardly unique to Tibetan Buddhism. Many meditative traditions worldwide speak of waking up to the nature of thought or the ephemeral quality of phenomena. Yet the Bardo Thirdol situates this awakening in an extremely high-stakes environment right after death, when the soul may no longer possess the comforting familiarity of the physical body. The text's approach is bold. It affirms that even in the absence of the body, recognition is possible, and if achieved, can lead to instantaneous liberation. One might analogize the mind to a projector in a dark cinema. The illusions in the bardo are the images on the screen. Typically, we become so enthralled by the movie, be it blissful or terrifying, that we forget we are the projector's light. The Bardo Thirdol repeatedly insists that at any moment the soul can realize, I am the light behind these images. Instantly, the illusions cease to have an independent grip. They remain, but their power to compel or horrify diminishes, because the soul sees them as self-created. In practical life, this instruction manifests as a steady discipline of mindfulness and introspection. When strong emotions arise, anger, jealousy, desire, we train ourselves to note their arising, see them as transient and not become engulfed. This daily habit becomes the foundation for the moment we transition out of the body. If we've never practiced recognition of illusions in life, the chance of doing so amidst the bardo's intensity is slim. Conversely, if we've spent years acknowledging our mental fabrications without losing ourselves in them, we stand a better chance of maintaining recognition in the after-death realm. Interestingly, this emphasis on recognition parallels certain Vajrayana practices like Dzogchen or Mahamudra, which teach direct insight into the nature of mind. In those advanced paths, practitioners strive to recognize the mind's luminous emptiness even in waking life, eventually experiencing a continuity of awareness through dreams, meditative states, and beyond. The Bardo Thirdol is akin to a set of instructions for applying that continuity in the ultimate test, death itself. Thus, while the illusions described can seem exotic or daunting, they boil down to an ancient spiritual truth. The real captivity is not in external chains, but in our inability to see through appearances. By cultivating recognition, we discover that the bars of our prison are self-erected, and that we hold the key in the simple yet profound act of awareness. Whether we stand in daily life or in the swirling bardo, recognition lights the path to freedom. As we arrive at deeper layers of understanding, we might ask, how do we integrate the Bardo Thirdol's lessons into a modern lifestyle filled with technology, urban routines, and secular worldviews? While the text emerged in a context vastly different from today's globalized reality, its core insights are surprisingly adaptable. First, we can acknowledge that even in a secular environment, the truth of impermanence remains undeniable. Our devices become outdated, relationships change, and our own bodies age. Recognizing impermanence is the doorway to embracing each moment with gratitude rather than taking it for granted. Second, we can adopt some form of daily meditative or reflective practice, even if brief. The Bardo Thirdol does not demand hours of strict monastic discipline for every practitioner, though that may be ideal for some. A few minutes each morning spent watching the breath and noticing thoughts can plant the seeds of recognition. Over time, such simple practices foster a steadier mind, less prone to extremes of attachment or aversion. Third, we can choose to engage in mindful rituals around endings. For instance, at the conclusion of a project, a relationship, or a season, we might pause to honor the transition instead of rushing on to the next thing. These small rituals mirror the text's emphasis on conscious transitions. By treating every ending as a mini bardo, we prime ourselves to face the ultimate ending death with the same level of attention and calm. Furthermore, we can familiarize ourselves with the concept of illusions as they appear in everyday life. Instead of literal wrathful deities, we may face illusions like, I need everyone's approval, or I must be perfect to be loved, or I'm powerless to change my circumstances. These illusions, once recognized, lose their potency. In this sense, reading or studying the Bardo Thödol can serve as a metaphorical map for dismantling the illusions that cause suffering in our day-to-day experiences. For those inclined toward deeper spiritual work, exploring retreats or guided Bardo courses can be a next step. Many meditation centers offer specialized teachings on the Bardo, bridging ancient texts with modern commentary. Some even host workshops that simulate aspects of the after-death experience through extended sensory deprivation or guided visualizations, or with the aim of helping participants develop resilience and recognition. Lastly, we can reconsider how we approach the death of others, whether family, friends, or even pets. Instead of merely leaving all decisions to funeral homes or hospitals, we can bring mindful presence to the process. Simple acts, placing a meaningful object near the dying individual, reciting comforting words from any spiritual text, or just offering unwavering presence can make a profound difference. Even if we lack full faith in the Bardo realms, the practice of kindness, shared vigil, and calm support remains universally beneficial. Therefore, integrating the Tibetan Book of the Dead into modern life does not require adopting its cultural trappings wholesale. It simply requires a willingness to view the entire spectrum of existence, life, death, and the in-between as an opportunity for awareness growth and compassionate connection. A question that often arises in discussions of the Bardo Thödol is whether the text addresses moral conduct or shula, in the same way many other Buddhist teachings do. Typically, Buddhist traditions emphasize ethical living, refraining from harm, theft, dishonesty, sexual misconduct, and intoxicants as a foundation for stable meditation and eventual insight. While the Bardo Thödol itself focuses primarily on the post-death experience, it does implicitly underline the importance of living ethically in order to face death with fewer regrets and a clearer conscience. The text notes that attachments to harmful actions can manifest as terrifying illusions in the afterlife. For instance, if someone habitually acted out of cruelty or deception, the karmic traces of these behaviors might appear in the Bardo as threatening figures or oppressive environments. Conversely, a life shaped by kindness, honesty, and altruism generates calmer inner conditions, potentially giving rise to more peaceful visions or even direct recognition of the clear light. Thus, while the text might not lay out an explicit code of conduct, it strongly implies that how we behave in life shapes the illusions and potential freedoms we encounter in death. Furthermore, the concept of living as if you are already in the Bardo resonates with ethical accountability. If every thought and intention is eventually reflected back in the illusions of the in-between state, then each moment of the day is an opportunity to plant wholesome seeds. By addressing negative impulses, anger, greed, envy, as soon as they arise, and consciously replacing them with empathy and restraint, we prepare the mind to navigate illusions in a calm, aware manner. These suggestions echo the broader Buddhist understanding that virtue is not about dogmatic rule-following, but about cultivating a mental environment conducive to insight and compassion. A mind free from guilt and remorse rests more easily in meditation, and by extension can respond more skillfully in the bardo. This clarity also fosters a deeper connection to others, reducing tendencies to isolate in self-centered concerns, a crucial step given that illusions in the afterlife often stem from the sense of a separate, threatened self. Hence, while the Bardo Thural does not read like a manual of moral precepts, it presupposes the entire Buddhist framework that upholds kindness and wisdom as necessary ingredients for liberation. This interweaving of ethics with post-death navigation underscores Buddhism's holistic approach. The path to enlightenment does not begin at the funeral pyre. It starts in how we treat ourselves and others on a daily basis. If we consistently sow the seeds of compassion, generosity, and patience, then the harvest we reap both in life's final hour and beyond will reflect those qualities. From this vantage, living ethically becomes more than mere social conformity. It becomes an integral strategy for ensuring that when illusions loom largest, whether in crisis, near-death moments, or the bardo itself, our minds can remain steady, our hearts open, and our awareness unobscured by regret or latent malice. And that, fundamentally, is what the Bardo Thural seeks to guide us toward ultimate freedom. A freedom that hinges not on random grace, but on the cultivated clarity of a loving, awake mind. Beyond ethics, there is an aesthetic of devotion woven into many Bardo Thural-based practices. In Tibetan Buddhism, devotion toward enlightened figures, be they historical Buddhas or meditational deities, plays a significant role in stabilizing the practitioner's mind. The text often refers to the appearance of various Buddhas or Bodhisattvas in the Bardo, highlighting that recognizing them as emanations of one's own mind does not negate the reverence one feels. Rather, devotion and recognition coexist. You see the deity as both an external symbol of awakened qualities and an internal reflection of your own highest nature. This devotional element can be perplexing to those with a purely rational or secular mindset. Yet in practice, devotion acts like a heartfelt anchor. When the mind is swayed by illusions, remembering a beloved deity or even a revered teacher can invoke calm trust and the willingness to release fear. This is not blind faith in an external savior. It's the strategic harnessing of emotional energy to counteract confusion. A mind steeped in devotion is less likely to spiral into despair because it has a consistent, uplifting focus. This interplay of devotion and self-recognition extends into daily life as well. Some practitioners keep images of compassionate deities like Avalokiteshvara or Tara around their homes, not out of idol worship, but to remind themselves of compassion they aspire to embody. When facing challenges, health issues, interpersonal strife, or career stress, they may recite mantras linked to these figures, generating a protective mental field. In Bardo teachings, such devotion surfaces when illusions intensify, providing an emotional and spiritual anchor that helps the soul remain oriented toward clarity. Interestingly, modern psychology acknowledges that positive visualization, such as imagining a supportive figure or environment, can greatly aid in managing stress and anxiety. Tibetan devotion taps a similar mechanism, except it frames that supportive figure as both a reflection of ultimate wisdom and a catalyst for tapping one's own latent compassion. Thus, while the appearance of deities in the text can seem fantastical, the underlying psychological process is deeply pragmatic. It's about learning to direct emotional energies in a way that fosters resilience and openness. Some Westerners adapt this devotional approach by substituting culturally resonant figures, perhaps a beloved ancestor, a guardian angel, or even a symbol like a radiant heart. The key is the heartfelt connection that transforms fear into trust, isolation into interconnectedness. If at death or in a high-stress crisis, one can evoke this bond, illusions lose much of their grip. Hence, devotion is more than a peripheral ornament in the Bardo Thodol. It is an essential pillar complementing the intellectual recognition of illusions. Devotion provides warmth, humility, and an emotional container that makes the rigorous process of self-confrontation more bearable. By weaving devotion and recognition together, the practitioner stands a greater chance of maintaining poise during life's storms and the afterlife's cosmic theater. As we delve into the final arcs of this exploration, it's worth reflecting on how the Bardo Thodol frames the soul's journey, not as a linear progression, but as an ongoing cycle. The text acknowledges that many souls, upon encountering illusions, do not attain immediate liberation. Instead, they circle back into rebirth, propelled by unfinished desires, unresolved fears, and incomplete lessons. This cyclical pattern forms the basis of samsara, the wheel of existence that Buddhists across traditions seek to transcend. In this light, the Bardo Thodol does not judge the soul that fails to recognize illusions on the first try. It simply offers another chance at awareness, whether in subsequent days of the Bardo or in future lives. This open-ended generosity sets it apart from doctrines that posit a single judgment or a permanent afterlife state. In the Tibetan vision, the cosmos is fluid. Consciousness flows into realms that match its frequency, learning bit by bit until it finally awakens to its own luminous nature. This cyclical view has ethical and existential implications. It suggests that no single life is an isolated event. Our actions echo through multiple lifetimes, shaping the conditions for future births. At the same time, it implies a vast horizon of possibility. If we miss the opportunity for recognition now, the wheel keeps turning and another chance will emerge. Yet, with each missed opportunity, we reinforce the patterns that keep us bound in repetitive cycles of suffering. In practical terms, the cyclical perspective encourages us to make the most of this life. Rather than resigning ourselves to indefinite do-overs, we can harness our current opportunity for practice. The text would remind us that this very moment, this conversation, this breath is part of the journey to recognize illusions and cultivate compassion. Each mindful moment sows seeds that could blossom in the Bardo or in future incarnations, just as each moment of ignorance or harm sows seeds for confusion. Moreover, the cyclical dimension underscores the significance of bodhicitta, the awakened heart that vows to liberate all beings. Because the cycle is collective, no one truly escapes suffering until every consciousness recognizes its true nature. This mutual entanglement spurs the bodhisattva vow, a commitment to return again and again, compassionately, assisting those still caught in illusions. In the Bardo Thodol, such a vow can manifest as a conscious choice in the final Bardo stage, returning to help, rather than dissolving into the clear light for personal bliss. Thus, the cycle of samsara, as illuminated by the Tibetan Book of the Dead, is not a grim treadmill, but a grand stage for the play of consciousness, where every being has infinite potential for insight, albeit often obscured by illusions. The text's hope is that through recognition, devotion, and compassion, more souls will exit the cycle or willingly re-enter it as agents of love and guidance. The cyclical nature of existence is both humbling and inspiring, reminding us that life, death, and rebirth form a continuum of learning in which we are all intimately entwined. As this extensive exploration draws closer to conclusion, it's instructive to revisit the core motifs of the Bardo Thödol and distill them into practical guidance for everyday life. The text's repeated message is that awareness clear, steady, and compassionate can transform every experience, whether it's an argument with a co-worker, a personal crisis, or the moment of dying. Our illusions, no matter how towering, rely on our unexamined reactions for their power. The instant we see them as mind-made constructs, they lose their dominion. This principle applies to small irritations as much as to cosmic bardo visions. If a partner's thoughtless comment triggers disproportionate anger, we can in that flash practice recognition. This anger is arising in me. It feels all-consuming, but it's an energy shaped by my history and expectations. It is not an ultimate truth. The shift from reactivity to awareness can take seconds, yet it changes the entire emotional landscape. In Bardo terms, the wrathful deity of anger is recognized, thus disarmed. Similarly, when seductive illusions arise, a craving for more possessions, applause, or superficial validation, we can see them as peaceful deities. They appear alluring, but clinging to them cements a sense of separateness and dissatisfaction. By noticing the fleeting nature of desire, we avert the trap of thinking external acquisition will grant lasting fulfillment. Again, a simple pivot of perspective reclaims our agency, echoing the Bardo Thödol's command, recognize this deity as your own mind. In parallel, the text's strong emphasis on letting go resonates in daily relationships. Are we clinging to old grudges, unhealed resentments, or self-definitions that no longer serve us? Each day we can train in releasing these mental possessions, loosening the clenched fist of ego. Then when the final moment arrives, we'll have a well-developed capacity for release. Just as a musician practices scales for years to perform a concert, we practice letting go repeatedly, so that in death's concert we can play with grace rather than collapse into fear. Furthermore, the text reaffirms the power of communal support. We need not attempt this journey in isolation. In life, spiritual communities, whether formal sanghas or informal meditation groups, offer encouragement, shared wisdom, and mutual accountability. In death, the presence of loved ones chanting, praying, or simply sitting with a calm presence can remind a disoriented soul of the compassion that transcends physical existence. Taken together, these lessons compose a tapestry of living that is grounded in mindfulness, compassion, and the bold acceptance of impermanence. We glean from the Bardo Thödol that these qualities are not luxuries or accessories to a spiritual path. They are the central pillars that hold us steady. If practiced diligently, they become second nature, enabling us to meet not just the illusions of the afterlife, but the illusions of each day with a spirit of curiosity and kindness. In doing so, we affirm that the teachings of a centuries-old Tibetan scroll have profound relevance for modern hearts seeking freedom. As we conclude this extensive journey through the Tibetan Book of the Dead, the Bardo Thödol, we stand at a threshold ourselves. We have traversed its poetic imagery, its structured Bardo phases, its emphasis on compassion, devotion, and recognition, and its instructions for guiding both the dying and the living. We have seen how it merges the practical with the mystical, the communal with the deeply personal and the ancient cultural context with universal human concerns. At its core, the text whispers a single potent reminder: this life and every life is but a passing dream if we fail to see through the illusions that grip us. Death, rather than being an abrupt stop, becomes a mirror reflecting our deepest emotional imprints and karmic tendencies. Armed with awareness, we can approach that mirror without terror, recognizing that the shapes we see, be they luminous or menacing, are ultimately expressions of our own consciousness. In this recognition lies the seed of liberation. Such liberation, however, is not served on a silver platter. It requires that we cultivate presence while alive by meditating, by acting ethically, by directing our devotion toward compassion, and by repeatedly letting go of what we cannot hold forever. It demands that we practice small deaths, every day the death of ego in a heated moment, the death of clinging in a moment of greed, the death of pride in a moment of humbling. Each time we allow an unwholesome state to dissolve under the gaze of awareness, we rehearse for the grand dissolution that awaits at the end of our physical existence. What emerges is a path that is both solemn and filled with hope. The Bardo Thodol never denies the difficulties of dying or the potential terrors of illusions. Yet it consistently returns to the possibility of awareness breaking through, of illusions melting in the face of recognition, and of compassion ripening even in the starkest transitions. This unwavering optimism that no soul is irredeemably lost, and that every experience, however daunting, can be a gateway to insight, stands as a beacon for those who fear death as a hopeless curtain call. To truly honor the Tibetan Book of the Dead, we need not memorize every line or adhere to every ritual detail. Rather, we can strive to internalize its central messages, the mind's creative power, the necessity of conscious letting go, the grace of compassion, and the unstoppable potential for waking up. Whether we dwell in a mountain hermitage or a bustling city, whether we practice formal religion or none, the Bardo teachings can inspire us to treat each moment as a precious chance to see beyond appearances. In the end, the final gift of the Bardo Thodol is an invitation to fearless intimacy with existence itself. It asks us to greet life, death, and all transitions as a continuum of unfolding awareness, each stage offering both challenges and keys to liberation. If we accept this invitation, if we commit to living each day with eyes open to impermanence, illusions, and the quiet pulse of compassion, then we walk a path that transcends mere survival. We walk a path of awakening, bridging the worlds of form and formlessness with the lamp of mindful, loving recognition. And with that lamp in hand, we discover that neither life nor death can ever truly confine a consciousness brave enough to see through its own illusions. In reflecting on the journey we've shared today, one thing stands clear: the Tibetan Book of the Dead isn't merely about death. It's a gentle reminder to embrace life with a deeper sense of presence and gratitude. Through these profound teachings, we learn that every day matters, every breath is precious, and every moment is a chance to connect with the greater truths of existence. I hope this exploration inspires you, as it inspired me to live more fully, love more deeply, and release fears that hold us back. What resonated most with you in this video? Drop your thoughts and experiences in the comments below. Your insights and perspectives enrich our community and help everyone grow. Let's keep the conversation flowing and continue discovering the hidden wisdom that connects us all.